Reborn in the empire where the sun never sets to become a pirate. Hello again, dear adventurers of the multiverse. Thanks for joining us once more on this epic journey. Remember, this story is pure science fiction from our wild imagination, so don't go trying to summon dragons in your backyard. The rights of this amazing novel belong entirely to its original author. We are only the narrators. Do you want more adventures? Show some love to our YouTube channel with a subscription and a like, and if you want exclusive content, our Patreon is waiting for you with open arms. Chapter 351 Disgrace. This story was a surprise prepared by Lorraine specifically for Mara. The content itself lacked any tangible value. It was simply a chaotic, disjointed, northeastern hodgepodge, forcibly imbued with suspense. Was Mori a traitor? Did he blow up the arsenal? Was there collusion with the British? How did Lorraine, or rather, Rule, escape the hail of bullets with the women and the injured? Was the beautiful and fragile Moorish girl, Leonor, still safe? Could she reunite with her lover? Was she harmed? These were all questions. These seemingly insignificant questions instantly filled Mara's mind, forcing him to ignore some of the details at hand and blurring Lorraine's distinctions between friend and foe. At least to a certain extent, Lorraine succeeded in lowering Mara's guard. With his guard down, Mara, preoccupied with his own concerns, once again viewed Lorraine as someone he could use. Seeing the British imminent capture of the city, he readily accepted the offer, selecting an adjutant and 4 strong non-commissioned officers from his crew, and then building a plank to board the ship one by one from the plank road. At the last moment, Lorraine, at the oars, quietly tightened his grip on the hilt of his knife. In his view, the trap he had set for Mara wasn't a sound plan at all. It was a risky venture, a ridiculous little trick that likely meant nothing to anyone but Mara. Because through their brief yet profound encounter, he had discovered that Mara was a special person. Generally speaking, every adult has their own style and habits. It's like a mad millionaire setting up a chess game in a crowded park, forcing passers-by to bet their lives and property, threatening to beat them if they refused. This is when people's personalities become apparent. Some, unaccustomed to pondering the deeper meaning behind bizarre moves, yet confident in their own strengths, will often overturn the chessboard. If the person setting the pieces dares to act rashly, they'll resort to arm wrestling. Henna and Leif exemplify these two distinct types. Their directness and impulsiveness don't imply foolishness, but rather leverage their strengths to avoid their weaknesses, foregoing their greatest advantage while also avoiding the worst possible outcome. Some are more calculating. Calculating people often have a gambler's instinct, prone to taking risks and ignoring or prematurely accepting negative outcomes. They happily enter a game, chasing both the outcome and the process, like Carmen. Lorraine is the third type, possessing both qualities. He might play chess with a board, taking his victory for granted. But if defeat is truly irreversible, he might overturn the table before his opponent makes their final move. After all, he has a higher chance of winning in a fight. Mara, on the other hand, is the fourth type. His talent leans towards the first type, but his thinking is closer to the second. He tends to overthink things, but often loses sight of the key points. He is easily tempted and easily influenced. When Lorraine sets up the chess table, he sits across from her. When Lorraine declares herself crazy, he sets aside the game, which is at stake, and ponders the cause of Lorraine's madness. His self-confidence is unfounded, and his smooth life has little to do with personal ability, it's simply a matter of fate. Because of this, he or they will always stop at some point in life, sooner or later. Once their luck or their family can no longer protect them, they will inevitably stop. And today seems to be the day when Mara stops. Lorraine won the bet, and Mara and his seemingly more powerful entourage boarded the boat. Bardo rolled up the planks, and Lorraine released the hilt of the knife he secretly grasped and rowed a boat to a distance of about 50 meters from the plank road, completely out of effective range of the muskets. Major, he put away the oars, stood up as if nothing had happened, and raised the sail with Bardo. Major, the wind is light today, and the sky is dark. It will take a long time to find the San Carlos. Why don't you go to the cabin and rest for a while? Mara, who was busy thinking about his life, suddenly broke away from his thoughts and rolled his eyes in panic. Rule, the San Carlos is fighting, but she can't hold on alone. Do you know why I boarded your boat? Because we happened to meet. That's certainly a reason, but it's not the most important reason. Mara swung his arms, looking heroic. Like I said, the San Carlos can't hold on alone. But I seem to have heard that the British don't have a ship this time. They have cannons. Mara glared at Lorraine fiercely. They have cannons. Even if they can't hit the cunning and flexible San Carlos, the other San Carlos is doomed to be killed. We need more powerful forces. Granada is very close to us. That's why I want to board your boat. The San Carlos must defend their home port, but we can go to Granada. Let our powerful army change the tragic fate of this fortress. Lorraine raised her eyebrows. You mean, asking for help? It's asking for help. Mara uttered the syllables in a sonorous and powerful voice. There is no time to hesitate. Rule, take me to Granada immediately. You can be the hero who saves the fortress. Then we'll have to turn and head west. Lorraine reached out and felt the wind direction. This makes the wind even worse, Major. It might take us 10 hours to get this little boat to Granada. I'll be waiting for you in the cabin, and my adjutant will guide you. You won't get lost. With these words, Mara winked at his adjutant. The adjutant understood and led 2 soldiers to remain on the deck, while 2 others escorted Mara into the cabin. The hatch closed. Watching the hatch seal shut, Lorraine smiled at his adjutant. The Major's speeches are always very long, right? It must be hard to be his adjutant. The cold adjutant turned his face away. This has nothing to do with you. How can you say it has nothing to do with you? Lorraine looked up at the lake shore that was getting farther and farther away. Because the wind direction is right, we are more than 200 meters away from the shore without realizing it. If we want to get to Granada, we still have countless 200 meters to go. Not so many 200 meters. Lorraine moved his shoulders and said cheerfully, to be honest, I was surprised that Mara left you on the deck. He actually knew to be on guard, huh? 200 meters from the shore, unless you have a high-level hunter on your ship, and that person is sensitive and happens to be on the shore. Otherwise, the muskets will be completely ineffective, and they may not even know what happened on the ship. The adjutant finally began to feel something was wrong, and drew out his sword with a clang. Rull civilian, your speech is very dangerous, for someone nearly made a scapegoat. No statement is too dangerous. For someone plotting against others, your preparations are far from adequate. This is my epitaph for the 3 of you. Thanks, no thanks. Mara, accompanied by his guards, entered the cramped cabin of the fishing boat. Compared to a warship, a small fishing boat clearly couldn't accommodate multiple decks, nor was the interior space adequately divided. The cabin was a messy, open space, with 2 old rope beds hanging on the walls, a few chests in the corner, a wardrobe fixed to the bulkhead, and the rest of the space filled with all sorts of miscellaneous items likely to be used during a voyage. These included scattered ropes, scraps of sail for mending, fish baskets, fishing rods, nets, and even mallets and rivets for repairing ships. Mara had anticipated this scene, the awful atmosphere, the awful smell, and even worse, in the only tidy, open space in the cabin, a man lay sprawled on the floor in the center, heavily bound and gagged. In the dim light of the lantern, Mara could clearly see the man's face. Antonio Tiresias, woo, how did you get on this ship? No, didn't your people say you were buried alive in the Gospel Fortress? Woo, what did you say? Woo, des, pace? Behind, a faint sound of wind. 2 sudden gusts of wind rose from behind, followed by a faint groan of pain from the guards. They fell heavily to the ground, a thud, each one shaking Mara's heart. He twisted his head with difficulty and saw, above the hatch, in that small, footless spot, a strange figure, clinging to the wall as if floating in midair. Her clothes were pure black, her skin was brown, and she had large, beautiful, sparkling emerald eyes, and 3 gorgeous, unforgettable bows. Leonor, Mara shuddered and swallowed. Ms. Leonor, P.S. Despace in this text refers to behind. I looked it up on yaudeo.com and found that the Spanish translation behind it is, Despace de la muerte alguien, which is both long and boring. I have no idea how Spanish people express this simple meaning in normal spoken language. Who cares if I don't have any Spanish friends? I shrugged. Chapter 352, Zhang Liang's Plan, Ladder Over the Wall. 1780, Lorraine, in her small fishing boat, finally located the San Carlos, quietly anchored on the lake. She exercised caution, even in the absence of any known enemy forces, and maintained a strict blackout. This, of course, was also due to the smooth progress of the battle on shore, obviating the need for the planned naval gunfire support from the lake. This demonstrated Nelson's profound command and strong hand. When Lorraine called out Nelson's name, they had yet to reunite with the men aboard the ship. Henna and Lorraine stood side by side at the bow. Initially puzzled by the name, Henna asked, "Why do you think Nelson would be on board? He's the overall commander of today's operation. He should be commanding the troops from shore." "Of course he is," Lorraine replied with a smile. "Daniel is a London gentleman who prides himself on his rigidity. Whether support is needed on land or not, he won't change the established battle plan without authorization. Leif wouldn't have considered such a detailed order as a blackout. Honestly, I doubt he would have ordered the sailors ashore if the ship was given to him, as that would have allowed him to participate in the battle himself. No one else. Who else could it be? Nelson's loyal captain of the guard? Remember, this ship is almost entirely made up of our sailors. Nelson's captain of the guard can't control the ship, and neither Daniel nor Leif would have respected his orders." Henna was finally convinced. But it was only a matter of persuasion. She just wanted to chat with Lorraine, who as in command was of no concern to her. Bardo waved his lantern, sending out a signal that signaled Lorraine's identity. The deadly silence of the ship echoed with a series of high-level lights, a series of long, short, long, 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 telling Lorraine that the commander on board was Nelson himself. On deck, Nelson gave Lorraine a warm embrace. "I always underestimated you, Drake. Aside from your faith, you're practically perfect." "A long overdue standard Puritan speech?" Lorraine responded cheerfully. "It seems you're not some Spanish colonel in disguise. I'm the real deal. Even if you search all of Spain, you won't find a young officer as handsome as me. As you're my employer, I compliment you." The two men laughed heartily, walked to the side of the ship together, and gazed side by side at the clamor of the battlefield not far away. "How is the battle going?" Lorraine asked. "Mr. Major is as reliable as you." Nelson pointed to the place where the fire was the hottest. Lorraine recognized that it should be the militia camp and the commander's residence of Tiresias, which is right above the fortress of Santa Maria. 10 minutes ago, he completely defeated the enemy's defense line. Almost 2 companies of Spaniards retreated, and then they regained their foothold in this area, because there is their bunker. It is large and strong, a heavily guarded bunker. Nelson blinked. "If I remember correctly, you didn't seem to mention this trouble in your previous letter." "I promise I didn't mean it. After all, I learned the news only a few hours earlier than you, and there were 4 guns pointed at my head at that time." "4 guns? 4 guns, well maintained and loaded with lead bullets." Nelson laughed narrowly. "It sounds like your life alone in the civilized world is not any easier than ours." "Who knows?" Lorraine shrugged nonchalantly. "Colonel. Although I destroyed the arsenal at the heart of the bunker, depriving them of most of their gunpowder, the Spanish haven't completely lost their ability to strike back. From what I know, the Watergate Tower and the wall batteries have gunpowder. The grenadiers in the towers and the sailors stranded on shore have plenty of loot. The bunker also has sturdy, impenetrable gun turrets." "You mean, we can give our army some support, while the Spanish are preoccupied, destroy the coastal defense batteries near the lakeside pier? We can make the San Carlos even more effective." Nelson accepted Lorraine's suggestion. The San Carlos quickly took action, lifting the blackout and weighing anchor to dock. As the ship started, Nelson saw the one-armed Bardo, rifle in hand, crossing the deck with 2 richly dressed, Spanish-looking prisoners. He was completely confused for a moment. "Drake, with 4 guns pointed at your head, you still have time to accept prisoners. As long as the prisoners are valuable, I can always make time." Lorraine explained the specific location and structure of the lakeshore artillery to the temporary artillery officer, and made time to respond to Nelson's words. "There is a small trouble that you haven't had time to know. The change of fortress commander originally scheduled for May 5th has been advanced. The ceremony is scheduled to be held on May 1st, and tomorrow the governor of Nicaragua and the admiral of the Granada garrison formation will arrive together. Their flagship will be a level 5 ship. As for Granada's military strength, I don't need to say more, right?" "No need." Nelson's face was a little ugly. "A grenadier regiment, a line corps, 4 gunboats, and more than 120 guns. If they arrive tomorrow, we can't even establish a basic line of defense. That's why I need those two's assistance." Lorraine drew a large cross on the coastal defense map, not even looking up. "The one with a handsome beard is Baron Tiresias, the current commander of the San Carlos fortress and the commander-in-chief of the militia. The one without the beard is Major Mera, nephew of Colonel Mera, the admiral of the Granada garrison. In my opinion, Major Mera is more valuable than the Baron, but the Baron offered himself up and also provided that important information. It's neither moral nor logical for me to favor one over the other. In one infiltration operation, you actually captured 2 of the fortress's 3 military commanders. Nelson rolled his eyes. And from what you said, you're planning to alert. Nelson hadn't finished his words when a warning blasted from the observation deck. Unidentified vessel spotted approaching rapidly at 2 o'clock. Large sloop, with obvious signs of modification, no markings, no communications. 1.8 kilometers away, Lorraine and Nelson hurried to starboard to see. They saw a sloop, sails inflated, breaking through the waves and rapidly approaching in the night. The wind was not strong tonight, but thanks to the excellent fluid design and the advantage of the small ship's lightness, she still reached a relative speed of more than 4 knots, and was still speeding up, which could be distinguished with the naked eye. A flag was raised on her mast. It was a pirate flag. In the middle of the black flag was a blood-bright background, and on the background was printed a skull with a beard. The skull wore a strange tricorn hat, and 4 fuses protruded from the brim of the hat. It was twisting its body like a snake as the flag rolled. The observing sailor gave the most straightforward comment at the right time. Unknown sloop raised the flag. It has been confirmed that it is the Blackbeard Pirates of the Caribbean. Here comes Blackbeard Edward V, the arsonist Wilford. The pirate ship is 1.4 kilometers away, level 1 combat readiness, enemy attack. Chapter 353, Madman. Starboard, standby, shotgun, fire. With a command, the cannon roared. A continuous barrage echoed across the surface of Lake Nicaragua, creating a completely separate, unconnected second battlefield from the main battlefield on land. The pirates launched a ferocious charge against the Navy. The victim was the brigantine-class gunboat San Carlos, which had just changed hands that night. The attacker was a mere 15-meter-long, roughly modified general-purpose sloop, a high-speed vessel. A sloop, or sloop in general, is a single-masted schooner, as the name suggests, with a single mast and a fore and aft sail. This type of ship has been around for centuries. During the barbaric Middle Ages, when galleys dominated the western seas, sloops were introduced to Europe via Arabia. Along with a Latin sail, they were favored by Venetian merchants. Not only did they once serve as the core of Mediterranean trade, but they also evolved into the cargo la coque, a sloop favored by the Hanseatic League, becoming the ancestral source of all sailing designs in modern Europe. For this reason, humanists often compare sloop and coque, praising them as the Adam and Eve of the Age of Discovery. However, in the eyes of ship designers, the significance of Adam and Eve is vastly different. Crone once discussed these 2 sloops, living fossils of the sea, with Lorraine. In his argument, due to various minor factors such as wave resistance, load bearing, and keel structure, coque's ship type essentially lost its potential from the outset. Its rigidity determined its potential, and this potential doomed it to be replaced by the later multi-masted, fully rigged square-rigged ship. In other words, coque's hull was already on its last legs, and its passing into history depended solely on whether similarly priced ships could match or even approach her cargo hold size. Sloop was a stark contrast to coque. Her designers were clearly staunch agnostics. To adapt to the ever-changing environment and freely and efficiently harness the wind in the landlocked Mediterranean, her basic structure was imbued with dynamism and flexibility from the outset. Nothing was unchangeable. The aspect ratio can be increased, the freeboard can be raised, the bottom can be flat or pointed, the mast can be forward or aft. As long as the designer can stabilize the ship's center of gravity, everything else is negotiable, and the resulting ship will still adhere to the general characteristics of the sloop. This characteristic has earned it praise from ship designers around the world, making it the preferred choice for experimenting with new designs in the manufacturing industry for centuries. The development of the sloop can be roughly divided into 3 stages. The first was the Mediterranean period, when the sloop was first introduced from Arabia to the Mediterranean. It was equipped with a gaff-rigged Latin sail. While cumbersome to operate, it boasted unparalleled adaptability. The second stage was the offshore period. During this period, the cumbersome Latin sail was gradually replaced by the European mainstream soft-rigged sail, using a single or multiple spandrels with 1 or more gaffs. These ships could operate with as few as 2 people, offering relatively good adaptability and respectable speed. However, the scarcity of sailors meant they lacked flexibility in responding to emergencies. Therefore, sloops of this period were generally small and lightweight. Primarily used for offshore transshipment, short-distance trade, and shelf fishing. The third phase, the recent period, spanning the past 5 to 10 years, is referred to as the Bermuda period. Unlike European shipbuilders, who favored large and powerful vessels. North American shipbuilders, due to limited resources, have always preferred small to medium-sized vessels. A high-speed revolution quietly unfolded in the three major centers of North American shipbuilding. The combined forces of Boston's fluidity, Baltimore's structural design, and Bermuda's sail rigging unwittingly gave rise to a seafaring monster that astounded European experts, the Bermuda schooner. The Bermuda schooner's singular characteristic was speed. A sloop could reach 18 knots, a schooner and a brigantine 16 knots, and a Bermuda galleon 13 to 14 knots. Even at 70% speed, its sailing performance far surpassed its more cumbersome European cousins. These unconventional designs even gradually altered the military strategies of the maritime powers. Just a few years ago, the inherently weak sloop was completely unpopular with naval commanders. Even when choosing between the brigantine and the brig, major navies generally favored the larger, more heavily gunned brig. The brig's advantage over the brig lies in its slightly stronger self-defense and independent combat capabilities. While these advantages apply only to comparisons within its class, in the role of a frigate, it is clearly better suited for scouting and communications. However, the emergence of the Bermuda schooner completely changed this situation. The Bermuda brigantine is 50% faster than the traditional brig, while the Bermuda sloop has a top speed nearly double that of the brig, yet costs only 1/10 to 1/5. This offers unparalleled value for money. On the vast ocean, an absolute speed advantage is sufficient to avoid most battles, a principle of self-preservation for the Bermuda schooner. This also means that the relatively clumsy brig loses its advantage in scouting and communications. For the first time, the small sloop appeared on the procurement list of a powerful navy. To effectively distinguish this new type of sloop from the older sloops were given a new and unique definition: the universal sloop. The sloop, flying the pirate flag and charging towards the San Carlos, was a universal sloop. At 15 meters, it could barely be considered large among these sloops. It was more stable than medium or small sloops, but its crude materials and weak wave resistance still meant it had no power. Perhaps they could consider reinforcing the bow and then weighting the stern, perhaps enough to mount a 4 or 6 pound bow cannon. Who would charge a gunboat with such a ship? Even if the San Carlos was not a brigantine ship, it was still a gunboat, and the 16 guns on both sides were more than just for show. Was Blackbeard crazy? Lorraine couldn't guess. From the moment they first met, he'd realized Blackbeard's madness defied common sense. Tonight's attack on the Watergate Towers further confirmed this, proving Blackbeard to be a true lunatic, a thug, a gambler, and his stake was the unparalleled fighting prowess of himself and his men. "So, you want to board?" Lorraine coldly observed the sloop's ship charging recklessly into the night, suddenly realizing the pointlessness of trying to speculate on a madman's motives. The reason for his charge was irrelevant, as long as he knew his ultimate goal was to board. The only way to counter it was clear. He spoke into the night, as if speaking to Blackbeard hundreds of meters away. "You charge under shotgun shells. Blackbeard, whatever sorcery you use to boost the morale of your pirates, will it remain effective when the deck is littered with shredded flesh and limbs? Can your ship still forge ahead with such determination? All it takes is one direct hit, shotgun shells loaded, straight ahead, fire, boom 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 boom." As if to respond to Lorraine's words, the second round of gunfire rang out, and a sky full of bullets spread over the entire lake on the starboard side. There was no way for sloop, who was charging, to avoid it. The distance between the two sides was already very close, just over 300 meters away. Even in the dark of night, Lorraine could already see the situation on the deck through the wind lamp on the opposite ship. There were only a limited number of sailors on that deck. 2 were responsible for sailing, 1 was responsible for steering, and the other 3 were holding heavy objects similar to door panels to protect the sailors operating. They were actually laughing? Before Lorraine could see clearly, a sky full of shotgun shells poured down. Direct hit. It was not known whether it was 1 or 2 shotgun shells, it was not known whether it was 6-pound or 9-pound artillery fire, densely packed bullets mixed together, and at once there were hundreds of iron balls sweeping across the deck. The escorting pirates propped up the door panel with all their might, but the silence lasted only a moment before the seemingly heavy panel was ripped to shreds by the flying bullets. The figure behind them flew backward like a sack, its form long since lost. 6 pirates, all gone, but the battered sloop showed no sign of wavering or turning, and more pirates rushed out of the closed hold. Blackbeard walked in front of the pirates, his portly frame personally pressing the hand wheel, his face bearing the same cruel smile he had shown that night at the villa. "Boarding, boys. They think their bombardment will drive us away. Tell them it won't work. Tell them we'll kill them all." Blackbeard's pirates, board. At that command, all the pirates roared to the heavens. "Board the Spanish ship, revenge our fallen brothers, board. Kill them all, oh, 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 board." Chapter 354, More Money. Collision alarm, warning, warning. All crew members, seek safe havens, beware of falling overboard, beware of heavy objects, embark to starboard. Embark. You idiots, escape. Pitiful cries echoed across the deck, the San Carlos ablaze with activity. But even this chaotic din couldn't drown out the ghostly cries of the pirates a few dozen meters away. This panic was completely unnecessary. The last salvo had only been 150 to 60 meters apart, and with the gentle breeze and choppy waters of the lake tonight, Blackbeard's charge was far from fast. With the skill of the British gunners, they could easily reload a round in a minute and a half. They could have taught Blackbeard a lesson at close range, and if Blackbeard still persisted, they would have had ample time to gracefully evacuate the collision zone. However, such a tactical maneuver was possible for the Hinchinbrook and the Golden Deer, but the San Carlos, with its elite forces from both sides, was incapable of executing it. The San Carlos's personnel structure had been improvised earlier, thanks to Nelson's intervention. At the time, Lorraine was still trying to seduce Marat, and as a sign of respect, Nelson himself had not assumed the captaincy. The temporary captain was Nelson's chief of guards, Sergeant Six, a young non-commissioned officer, though not particularly gifted, with a long record of outstanding loyalty. He also selected the majority of the temporary crew. From then on, nearly all positions were filled by Nelson's guardsmen. The only two individuals from Drake's side to receive commissions were Leif and Daniel, one serving as ship's doctor and the other as a storm sergeant, identical to their positions aboard Lorraine's flagship. As one can imagine, during the previous period of silence, they had little opportunity to express their opinions on shipboard affairs. This short-sighted, nepotistic approach directly contributed to the ship's current predicament. To put it bluntly, the soldiers didn't understand their commander, and the commander didn't understand his soldiers. The temporary seamen didn't believe the sailors trained by the Merchant Guild could possess the same sophisticated naval warfare skills as their colleagues, and Drake's sailors didn't believe these arrogant temporary commanders could issue the right orders in such a time-sensitive situation. And they certainly didn't. Lorraine's face was as dark as a layer of toner, a frightening black. Just moments earlier, when Blackbeard had recklessly and heroically charged the San Carlos in adverse weather conditions, Lorraine had desperately hoped for a direct attack. He wondered if, when things turned out differently, the Caribbean's notorious pirate lords would bravely die like heroes, or flee in disgrace like countless other petty thieves. The direct attack arrived sooner than Lorraine had anticipated, but afterward, he witnessed not only Blackbeard's bravery but also his panic. Fear before the battle even began. When had the Drake Guild ever performed so poorly on the battlefield? Lorraine, caught completely off guard and humiliated in front of his colleagues, naturally blamed all the fault on Nelson, the incompetent chief of the guards. But Sergeant Six had unexpectedly approached him at this critical moment. He held his neck high, his face devoid of shame, and even his voice was as sincere and steady as ever, with an unpleasant air of composure in the face of danger. He said to Lorraine, "President Drake, the commander asked me to inform you that we are about to board and are at a disadvantage. You should meet up with him in the stern cabin as soon as possible, use our numerical advantage and the terrain of the stern cabin to establish a defense line, and wait for an opportunity." "Captain Six," Lorraine interrupted him rudely without even turning his head. According to the principle of privateering, from the moment the San Carlos was captured, this gunboat has been the property of the Drake Chamber of Commerce. Sergeant Six didn't understand the point of Lorraine's words at all. "President, what the commander meant," Lorraine interrupted for the second time, "we are at a disadvantage. Is this the colonel's judgment? Or your judgment?" Anger finally flashed across Six's face. "As the temporary captain of this ship and the commander's guard, I have an obligation to ensure the personal safety of the commander and you. It is my job to judge the battle situation. Although the commander disagrees, he still believes in my ability to command the enemy. In that case, don't make things difficult for the colonel." The two ships are not far enough apart. After a direct hit, the relative speed will remain at 2.5 knots. The collision will occur in about 1 minute, and the boarding battle will begin in 2 minutes at most. Lorraine quickly reported a set of data. As the commander of the upcoming enemy encounter, have you organized the assault team? The commander's guards are always in a state of readiness. It's still the guards thinking. Lorraine laughed out loud. As I said at the beginning, the San Carlos is the property of the Drake Chamber of Commerce. So, Bardo, you are the captain of this ship now. Let the guards do their job as guards, and let our people do our job with peace of mind. Yes, Bardo promised heavily, and pounded his chest with his only intact arm. Then he turned around and kicked a sailor who was running past to the ground. What's all this commotion? Spread the word. I'm the new captain now. The original command is cancelled. Our men must be in the mess hall within 2 minutes to collect their weapons and prepare for battle. Really? The sailor who had been kicked down leaped to his feet, shouting in surprise to the chaotic deck. Dad, Bardo is captain. Captain's order. The Navy's order is cancelled. Everyone must be in the mess hall within 2 minutes to collect their equipment. Anyone who fails to meet the deadline will be thrown into the lake to feed the sharks. Oh, the roar, no less than that of Blackbeard's crew, echoed the frustration of the Drakes who had been pent up all night. Sergeant Six stared blankly at the rootless, unfounded surge of morale before him. He couldn't wrap his head around how he and his fellow guardsmen had been suddenly dismissed. And if Lorraine's order superseded Nelson's, what would become of Nelson's authority? Loyalty urged Sergeant Six to argue. Mr. President, I'm not questioning your ownership of this ship. But you and the Drake merchants are mercenaries, under the command of your superiors. If you wish to adjust shipboard positions, you must first obtain authorization from your superiors. As per procedure, Lorraine ignored him. After handing over the task of organizing the manpower to Bardo, Lorraine called out to Henna. Henna, never far from him, swung by the rope before he finished speaking. Henna, take the helm immediately, and turn hard left. If you run fast enough, we'll have plenty of time to cut the ship's hull and avoid a major damage, so please run. I can fly. With that, Henna actually took flight. She swung up to the mast, leveraging the rope and leveraging the momentum to reach the shortest, steepest stay cable leading to the handwheel. In the blink of an eye, she had the handwheel under control, released the latch, and steered hard left. Full rudder to port. Heel. The semi-stationary San Carlos finally regained its momentum after a moment of panic, heeling to the water's surface as it slowly but steadily maneuvered its bow to the port side. Lorraine and Blackbeard were now only a mere 20 meters apart, their hulls finally forming a very narrow angle. Broadside. Sloop slammed hard into the San Carlos's starboard hull, creating visible cracks and dents. But thanks to the angle Henna had created, her force was ultimately deflected, carrying the entire ship along the San Carlos's starboard side until their sterns collided. The hull was intact. After the violent jolt, Lorraine was immediately met with this incredible news. Along with this good news, the iron claws of the grappling hook were released from sloop, catching the San Carlos's deck. Lorraine drew his sword from his waist with a clang, and with a single flick, he severed the two nearest grappling hooks. For the first time, he turned his head during the conversation with Six. The battle has begun, Mr. Sergeant. I think you should stay with the Colonel now. Mr. President, there is an established process for the identification of the command port. I am not greedy for the captain's authority, but no matter what, you should ask your superior for authorization. Authorization? Lorraine shook his head. You will meet Colonel Nelson soon. When you meet him, please convey my message that I am very dissatisfied with his choice, so this trip will cost extra. Chapter 355 The Lord of Terror. Night was deepening. The shadow of the San Carlos, accentuated by the darkness, made its shadow appear particularly massive, especially with a significant difference in height between the sloop and the brigantine. Looking up, this immensity became even more pronounced, even more terrifying. It was like gazing at a sleeping beast. Blackbeard stood behind the wheel, his hands tightly gripping the handle. His palms were sweating profusely. The sweat made the polished teakwood slippery, and the grip felt nothing like the usual smoothness of an arm. This was the allure of fear. As a dedicated desperado, Blackbeard relished fear immensely. He saw fear as a panacea, a potent force of tyranny, and invincibility, a freedom from the power of other fears, and a refusal to recall the bitterness of past cowardice and unwillingness. To reap this pleasure, he constantly challenged madness deemed unattainable by ordinary men. He'd done many mad things, but even if all the madness of the past were added together, it might not have surpassed the madness of today's life or death gamble. He charged a sloop, barely a ship, against a brigantine gunboat, commanded by the Spanish Navy. He was charging, in a Spanish colony, against the garrison of this great lake, with unfavorable weather and hydrological conditions. He relied only on an intangible aura, the skill he'd learned from countless gambles of fate, the ability to instill fear in his opponents. He had completely placed the decisive cards in the opponent's hands. In the midst of the charge, before the collision, before the two sides were completely entangled, if only one more cannon shot was fired, the Caribbean would lose another pirate king. Blackbeard would undoubtedly follow in the footsteps of Thomas the Fly. Could anything be crazier than this? Death, so sweet, Blackbeard laughed, for a sudden, amusing thought occurred to him. This sloop wasn't the first time this irrational charge had been made. 2 years earlier, her former owner had done the exact same thing to Blackbeard's flagship, the Queen Anne's Revenge. The ship's name was the beloved Lucia, and its reckless former owner was the legendary pirate hunter Fabiano, a renowned hero of the Gulf of Mexico. Blackbeard remembered Fabiano as the most formidable swordsman he had ever encountered. Back when he was still the pirate king, he was invited to the Gulf Coast port of Tampico to conduct a business deal, where he was ambushed by Fabiano. In that battle, the allies of justice, including Fabiano, numbered only 4, while the apostles of evil, excluding Blackbeard, numbered a full 25. Yet, Fabiano prevailed. Thanks to his exceptional swordsmanship and the trap set by the hunters, Blackbeard's defeat was inevitable. Almost all of his personal guards were killed, and 3 officers, including the ship's second-in-command, the helmsman, Simon, were captured alive by the hunters. Blackbeard, barely escaping the attack, was nearly devastated. Seeking to regain his confidence and prestige, he quickly tracked down Fabiano's hometown, Bays, through an intelligence agent. On the very day Simon was hanged, he stormed the estate, burned the farm, and slaughtered nearly every living thing he could see, including Fabiano's elderly parents and their 2 young sons and daughter. He concluded his assault by stripping the estate's sole survivor, Fabiano's beloved Lady Lucia. Naked and nailing her alive with 5 spikes to the wall in the villa's foyer, engraved with the Fabiano family crest. Fabiano vanished from sight. 6 months later, when Blackbeard had become the Blackbeard he is today and his flagship, the Queen Anne's Revenge, had been renamed, he was once again ambushed by Fabiano in Nassau. By then, he was surrounded by the Shadow Warrior Zheng Anyue and the Obsidian Blade Warrior Chamayamu, and he himself had been gifted by the endless terror he endured, transforming into a completely different person. The powerful Fabiano couldn't even break through Chamayamu's massive spear, leaving behind a severed arm and the bodies of a dozen or so companions in a miserable retreat. This led to the final battle, when he piloted the beloved Lucia in a desperate charge against the starboard side of the Queen Anne's Revenge. The memory was vivid. The former Fabiano, now Edward Blackbeard. Blackbeard found history coming full circle, retribution creeping in, just as Fabiano's screams before he was transformed into a sack of rags had come true overnight, stirring him to the point of wanting to roar. "Boys, there's a Spanish warship up ahead. Oh, those sailors in the Port Authority's villa are terrified. We're right before their eyes, and they don't even dare to fire. Oh, kill them all," Blackbeard roared with laughter. "Let's kill them all without a single one left. Let them know why we're called the devils of the Caribbean, why even pirates regard us as the embodiment of fear. Long live the terror. Long live the captain. Last 30 meters, boarding, kill." Blackbeard goaded the pirates huddled on the deck, their fury in vain. Some cast grappling lines from afar, hoping to snag their massive prey and annihilate any chance of escape. At that moment, the panicked and helpless San Carlos erupted in a resounding cheer, echoing the pirates' own. High morale, a desire to fight, and all manner of positive energy were unabashedly expressed in this reborn cheer. The air was thick with a scent that nearly made Blackbeard sick. He had passed fate's test. From 150 to 30 meters, he had thrown himself naked before the Spanish guns. A single stray bullet could have ended his life. But the Spanish hadn't seized the opportunity. The starboard gun ports were wide open, the guns protruding from the hull, never retracted since their last firing. With only the final 30 meters remaining, the Spanish had already squandered fate's favor. Even if they reloaded now, they wouldn't have time to fire before the beloved Lucia came aboard. In other words, Blackbeard had won. The winner takes everything, the loser pays with his life. The Spaniards, couldn't the damned, shameless Marat just accept the loss? Blackbeard felt his chest well with rage. He wanted to board Marat and confront him immediately, but he looked up just in time to see the San Carlos clumsily begin to turn. She remained almost motionless, all sails unfurled, simply using her rudder to steer, letting the currents twist her slightly. This twist wasn't intended to avoid a boarding from the beloved Lucia, but rather to prevent either ship from sustaining excessive damage in the collision. The cutout angle allowed for a more traditional approach, or perhaps, to expedite Blackbeard's men's boarding. Invitation to battle, the phrase popped into Blackbeard's mind, but he didn't have time to fully process the consequences. The two ships were boarding. The beloved Lucia's port bow rammed hard into the San Carlos's starboard side, leaving a deep dent at the point of impact, but the cutout angle prevented a breach. The collision wasn't thorough. It wasn't enough to dissipate the beloved Lucia's accumulated kinetic energy. The remaining force propelled the ship, pressing the San Carlos's hull forward. The San Carlos's rotation accelerated, and the beloved Lucia also adjusted its course uncontrollably. The angle between the two ships rapidly narrowed, until their sterns collided violently. Zheng Anyue cast his grappling hook high into the air. The iron claw, attached to a rope, was thrown 5 or 6 meters into the air, landing on the deck of the San Carlos and hooking in. Zheng Anyue, tugging on the rope, began to climb the shipboard, charging ahead of all the pirates. Quetzalcoatl. Curse my enemies, destroy my enemies, he prayed loudly to his god, his massive body tumbling onto the deck, and swung out a massive, indestructible wheel axe. The Blackbeard pirates are acting according to the captain's orders. Kill. Chapter 356 Battlefield Destroyer. The wheel axe whirred with a whirring sound. Drake's sailors, led by Bardo, waited on deck for battle, expecting only to follow their invincible captain in crushing the enemy as they always had. They had never considered that in a truly high-level Caribbean game, no one would be easy to defeat. The situation was severely unfavorable from the outset. Chamdum's wheel axe transformed into a streak of silver light, tracing a gleaming arc through the night. It vanished in the blink of an eye, and it soared over the crowd. Lorraine had no time to rescue him. His swordplay required ample maneuvering space, and to avoid getting in the way of his own sailors, he always fought far away from them, not even as part of the established formation. Henna was also unable to rescue him. Strength was not her forte, and even if a medium-range knife struck the wheel axe, the tiny impact would not be enough to change its trajectory. But who else could turn the tide of battle? Whoa! A war cry erupted. Behind the crowd, Leif's massive form leaped high, like a runaway chariot, careening wildly forward, ramming sailors in his path. He unflinchingly blocked the path of the wheel axe with his newly crafted massive crocodile skin shield. A ton. The sailors' ears rang with an indescribable, strange sound, like the impact of a heavy hammer, then the slicing of something solid. There was no echo, no roar, but it simply pierced through the brain, causing a throb between their brows. The sharp edge of the wheel axe sliced through the rough surface of the crocodile skin shield, splitting the first layer, then the second, then losing its edge at the third, ultimately failing to reach the bottom layer of wood. Leif's eyes glowed red. The crimson flickered like a flame, and tiny streaks of blood gathered from the periphery of his eye sockets toward his pupils. Whoa! With a roar, he opened his arms. Before the wheel axe's momentum had waned, its immense kinetic energy bearing down on him like a landslide, Leif, driven to his rage, flung his arms wide open, interrupting Zheng Anyue's intended strike with a method both incomprehensible to humans and yet also inconceivable to the most physical. A chilling silence fell on the deck. Drake's sailors, Blackbeard's pirates, these warriors who had seen countless battles, thought themselves accustomed to bloodshed and swordsmanship, completely silenced by the berserker's endless roar. They could only hold their gaze with their remaining strength as they watched the listless wheel axe flung high into the air, whirling back with a thud, piercing its owner's flesh. Leif rose, his steps shaking the earth as he reached the front of the line. With a clang, he drew the uncrowned king from behind his shield, the tip of his sword pointed at Zheng Anyue's heart. Coachman! This time, you won't be able to cut my shield. Zheng Anyue pursed his lips as he took off the giant spear from his back, then reached out and pulled his battle axe from the deck. Axe in left hand, spear in right, axe in front, spear on top. He lowered his center of gravity, lunged forward, and lowered his shoulders. Follower, you've found a good shield. It seems that you're finally a little more powerful than last time. But I will still cut your shield into pieces. I swear in the name of Huitzilopochtli, not only will I cut your shield into pieces, this time, I will cut you into pieces too. Scorching steam spurted from Leif's nostrils. You can't cut my shield, you can't cut my shield. Even if dusk falls today, you can't cut my shield. Woohoo! Zheng Anyue swung his axe to deflect the sword, but the axe swung, and the spear shot out like a venomous snake, hurtling straight for Leif's eye socket. Leif's eyes widened, his rigid pupils fixed on the incoming spear. He lunged forward, shield raised, and ducked. The spear pierced the shield. Feeling the force returning from the shield, Leif lifted his elbow, tilting it sharply. His right sword swung back, switching from a chop to a swing, aiming at his side, vital for mobility. Zheng Anyue's spear struck down like an iron rod. A dull thud sent Leif back 3 steps. Zheng Anyue, like a shadow, pursued him, spun around, and struck with his axe. Leif ducked and rolled to avoid the attack, running into a scramble of other pirates and sailors. In a flash, while the others were still stunned, his massive hand reached out, grabbed the unfortunate pirate by the neck, and flung him towards Zheng Anyue like a hidden weapon. Zheng Anyue swung his axe, slamming the axe blade into the pirate's side. The pirate's screams were cut short as he flew forward, crashing into the mast, his brains splattering. The ordinary crew members still engaged in the battle were horrified by the scene. No one wanted to end their lives in such a tragic way, so whether it was Drake's sailors or Blackbeard's pirates, the moment the fierce warriors Leif and Zheng Anyue arrived, they naturally broke apart and scattered. In the blink of an eye, the battlefield shifted for the second time. The main deck fight was over, and the group fight suddenly became a duel. Bardo, in command, was left with a mixture of laughter and tears, recalling Daniel's words to him after his arm was severed. Daniel had told him that Leif's frenzy had undergone a unique transformation during the bloody night at the villa, which Lorraine jokingly called the Warrior of Sorrow. This new type of berserker state is characterized by limited control. Even in calm moments, Leif can clearly and accurately distinguish friend from foe. However, while this distinction is one thing, Leif lacks the precise control of his body and muscles. His intensive training over the past few days hasn't yielded any encouraging results. The second characteristic of this new type of berserker state, again related to controllability, is its mental threshold. While a berserker's berserker state requires a state of mental rage, this new type doesn't seem to require this. Any strong emotion can trigger Leif's berserker state, and any emotional disruption can also trigger a return to normal. In short, Leif's berserker state has become easier to trigger, and interrupting it has become easier. Daniel couldn't yet say whether this new type of berserker state would be beneficial or detrimental to Leif, but he had a guiding principle: stay away from him when he's berserker. Bardo only now understood Daniel's meaning. Unlike in an experimental setting, on a real battlefield, Leif confronts the enemy with all his might. In this all-out state, his limited, barely noticeable awareness is insufficient for him to pay attention to his surroundings or care for his teammates. The safest way is to stay away. No matter how much damage Leif causes to the environment, all consequences will be borne by the groom who threw the flying axe. But, how to command on the spot on this situation? Bardo pinched his brow with a headache. No matter how good a commander is, he can't command a group of soldiers who are ready to retreat at any time. When the battle between Leif and Zheng Anyue started, the others' minds could no longer return to the battle itself. The only thing to do is to delay, until Leif and Zheng Anyue decided the winner, or Lorraine and Blackbeard? Chapter 357 King and King. The bow of the San Carlos, the forecastle upper deck. In military theory taught at military academies, boarding combat, even on the ship's surface, was considered 3 separate yet interconnected melee battlefields. These 3 battlefields were the main deck, which occupied at least half the ship's surface area, the poop upper deck, often housing the command center, and the forecastle upper deck, located just a stone's throw from the main deck. This distinction was primarily due to the height difference. According to the architectural standards of seagoing vessels of the era, the forecastle often extended 1 or 2 stories beyond the main deck, while the poop was 2 to 3 stories higher. Even assuming a 2-meter per floor elevation, the height difference between the main and upper decks was far beyond the reach of swords. However, each battlefield had its own importance. Generally speaking, the main deck was the core battlefield, consuming the greatest number of manpower on both sides. The poop served as the command center. Although its winding and narrow passageways were not ideal for offensive and defensive operations, it was the key to victory, worthy of the deployment of both sides' most elite special attack forces. In comparison, the forecastle upper deck held limited importance. It often covers only 1/6 of the ship's total surface area, and is relatively slender. Its main features typically include the bowsprit, mooring pile, and anchor capstan. The hatches leading into the forecastle aren't located here, but rather on the bulkhead connecting to the main deck. This shows that once the battle reaches boarding, the gains and losses of the forecastle deck are essentially irrelevant. Conventional tactics typically involve the defenders taking advantage of the terrain to deploy a ranged firepower unit, while the attackers employ a countermeasure based on the defenders' numbers. That's all. Today, for some unknown reason, Lorraine chose this spot as his battlefield. Blackbeard graciously accepted the challenge, cooperating with 4 elite pirates to oppose Lorraine. The king versus king situation unfolded smoothly, but neither side showed any sign of rushing into battle. Each leaned over the railing, observing the battle below, occasionally chatting. On the main deck, Zheng Anyue took the initiative. He seemed to have grasped some of Leif's principles, cleverly exploiting a flaw to lure him into a leaping attack, then easily dodging it and, as he retreated, hurled his spear. The spear pierced the air, glancing off Leif's thigh, leaving a large, bloody gash on the outside of his leg. Leif felt no pain, but his injured muscles could no longer move with the same agility they would have in good condition. Zheng Anyue counterattacked with his axe in both hands, striking with unwavering determination, forcing the war machine to its shield. Lorraine clicked his tongue and said, "Your Highness, your Indian warrior, Chamwim, he is an obsidian blade warrior of the Aztec descent, with a status similar to that of our Knights Templar. He is a warrior carefully selected to guard the Quetzalcoatl Temple. You can actually kidnap a Knight Templar to kill and rob for you, the natives." Blackbeard laughed loudly twice. Their beliefs are different from those of God. Even the Knights Templar do not have to abide by the 8 rules of chivalry. What's more, the Spaniards have demolished the temples of the Tenochtitlan tribe. Although they insist on selecting obsidian blade warriors like their ancestors, the warriors have long lost the gods they were asked to guard, so that's it, Lorraine suddenly realized. Blackbeard looked at Lorraine with interest. "But you, young man, you're not just an ordinary sailor, are you? I can't imagine how a young Spanish officer could earn the loyalty of Viking berserkers. Perhaps it's because of some divine intervention. You don't want to say it?" Blackbeard raised his eyebrows. "It doesn't matter. Regardless of your status, you're not my target. As long as you're willing to hand over Mara." Lorraine didn't know if it was an illusion, but he felt that Blackbeard seemed much more approachable today than he had been a few days ago. The problem was, he'd clearly risked his life to initiate a boarding engagement. If it was just for the sake of negotiations, then Blackbeard was taking his own life too lightly. Lorraine was puzzled. "Your Highness, are you here again for?" "I just killed Gonzalo de Oviedo, searched his study and bedroom, and threatened his mistress to open the secret room, but found nothing. The explosion killed Antonio de Tiresias in the underground fortress. After the explosion, I claimed that the commander's residence was empty and turned it upside down. I found 2 secret rooms, but still couldn't get what I wanted. This means that if Tiresias didn't carry my things with him, then this thing must be on Mara, but it's not in his villa, neither in the bedroom that I explored last time nor in the study that I failed to explore last time." "Where would your thing be?" Lorraine chuckled. "You mean, the thing you want is in Major Mara's luggage, or even on him?" "I'm not hinting at anything, I just want you to hand over Mara. Whether it's on him or not, I will judge in my own way. It seems that this is the final ultimatum." "It is indeed an ultimatum. Hand over Mara, otherwise I will kill everyone on the ship and take Mara away myself." Lorraine fell silent for a moment, then couldn't help but smile. "You can't kill everyone on board." Lorraine gestured toward the battle on the main deck. "Look, the berserker isn't stupid, just slow to react. He's already started to fight back." Leif began to fight back. Rather than finding a way to defeat Zheng Anyue, it was more about adapting to his injured leg, using brute force to push away Zheng Anyue's axe. Lorraine had experienced the berserker's formidable nature firsthand. Unafraid of pain, fearless of death, without fear or hesitation, he charged forward with immense force, seemingly foolish and predictable, but in reality, leaving no room for maneuver. "You can come in 4 directions, I'll only take 1. Leif used his shield to deflect the axe, then kicked out with his uninjured left leg, staggering towards Zheng Anyue, sweeping his sword. Zheng Anyue could only withdraw his axe to block, but how could he so easily block the berserker's attack? The sharp blade was coming. With a clang of steel, the seemingly slender Viking sword suddenly unleashed an unparalleled force, crushing Chamyam with the axe blade, sending him flying off the ground. The ground is a warrior's center of gravity and foundation. With his feet off the ground, Chamyam lost his fulcrum and swung his sword, sending him careening sideways, slamming heavily into the mainmast with a thud. He spat out blood, rising as he did so. The staggering, shattered figure had only taken 2 steps when Leif leaped over and struck him hard where he had fallen. Chamium swung his axe. This time, he used all his strength, but Leif's shield easily blocked the blow. "You can't break my shield, you can't break my shield," Leif howled, propping himself up with his shield and charging. Chamium, momentarily frozen after exerting all his might, could only watch helplessly as Leif's hand flashed with a cold light, piercing his heart. Bang! Leif's sword almost pierced through Chamium's chest, but at the moment of contact, 2 pirates from the sailor regiment flew over and used their whole bodies to barely push Leif away a step, causing the uncrowned king's blade to graze Chamium's shoulder and miss. Blood splattered. The sword that pierced the air still left a deep wound on Chamium's shoulder, and blood gushed out like a fountain. Chamium covered the wound and screamed in pain. At this critical moment, Lorraine's ears suddenly heard a loud noise. "Have you seen enough of the show, young man?" Blackbeard leaned the black blade on the ground in disgust, with only a bloodthirsty and ferocious look on his face. "Since you want to die loyally for Mara, I can fulfill your wish. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 358. Whose trap is it? How could one assess Blackbeard's personal combat prowess? Throughout Lorraine's history of one-on-one duels, whether completed or unfinished, few could truly put Lorraine at a disadvantage, and Blackbeard was undoubtedly one of them. This allowed him to offer a relatively accurate assessment of combat prowess, something difficult to quantify. Unlike combat performance, Lorraine believed Blackbeard's true talent lay in his agility, which was disproportionate to his physique, including movement speed, attack speed, and balance. While Blackbeard wasn't superior to skilled warriors in these areas, his ability to display the agility of a wolf within a bear-like frame clearly wasn't something that could be achieved through training. Aside from agility, the rest was a product of acquired skill. Blackbeard was a massive figure, his immense strength even slightly surpassing Lorraine's. Among those Lorraine knew, he was only slightly inferior to Leif before he went berserk. Furthermore, in the battle on the main deck, he was probably even inferior to the Obsidian Blade warrior, Zheng Anyue. He also possessed immense destructive power with his weapons. The Black Blade's unique shape, a cross between sharp and blunt, could strike weapons like a sledgehammer, its serrated fangs further concentrating the force. Once the thin blade surface was damaged, breakage seemed inevitable. In short, Blackbeard was formidable, easily a first-rate warrior. Fighting such a powerful and distinctive warrior was naturally exhilarating. Lorraine slowly drew his own blade, a single blade. This was the only flaw in the evening, as he hadn't considered the possibility of avoiding battle. His other blade remained in the green dewdrops, resting on the simple riverside dock of the San Juan River. Blackbeard hefted the black blade. "Have you changed your weapon? It's certainly more manly than that stupid, thin sword, but it still seems weak. Then please cut it off, Your Highness. I will cut you off this time." A scowl flashed across Blackbeard's face, and he strode forward, brandishing his blade. The 4 pirates guarding him stood in a semicircle, grinning, seemingly accustomed to their captain personally dispatching even the odd enemy. Blackbeard's blade met his blow. Blackbeard's bladework remained as unpretentious as ever, swift, accurate, and powerful, unwavering. Lorraine ducked to the side, then took a step to avoid it, only for the seemingly unreserved black blade to shift direction and pursue, switching from a chop to a slash. The strike closed in, leaving Lorraine unable to evade it. He abruptly stopped and swung his blade back. With a clang of metal, Lorraine's blade, as expected, became lodged between 2 teeth. The force transmitted to the blade wasn't dispersed, but instead focused on a single point, attempting to break Lorraine's blade apart. The stalwart Martini groaned. Lorraine tutted in disgust, drawing his sword upwards, letting the entire blade grate against the teeth of the black blade like a slash. Zilla-la-la-la. Sparks erupted from the collision of gold and iron. Blackbeard, taking advantage of the momentum, retracted his sword, gripping the hilt with both hands, turned and slashed again. Lorraine reclaimed his sword, but at the cost of losing speed. He was trapped in Blackbeard's attack range, like being back in the hallway of the villa many days ago. But this time, He no longer held the same slender sword that he didn't quite fit in his hand, and beyond the fray, there was no longer a terrifying, unerring hunter. He countered with an unconventional move, lowering his half-drawn sword, gripping the hilt, and slamming it down hard against the black blade's face. The black blade sank. The hammer-like blow struck the middle of the blade, interrupting Blackbeard's attack. He watched helplessly as Lorraine used this unconventional defensive maneuver as the beginning of an offensive attack. After smashing the blade, he thrust forward. Blackbeard could only dodge in a panic. He retreated, and Lorraine advanced, following closely, like a shadow. Although Lorraine was taller and his sword was longer, Lorraine took the initiative to move closer, and at a distance where neither of them could move freely, he used the lower half of the blade to cut Blackbeard's sword-wielding arm again and again. Pure suppression of skills. Blackbeard was so depressed that he wanted to vomit blood. He kept dodging awkwardly. The movement of his arms affected his center of gravity, and his disordered steps tripped his feet. He stumbled. It was just a tiny stumble, and Lorraine and he noticed it at the same time. Lorraine, who was in pursuit, stopped abruptly, leaned down, held the sword with both hands, the blade close to his face, and the blade pointed straight up. Stab. Blackbeard's eyes were bloodshot, and he blocked the black blade and shouted, "Kill him!" The conscientious guard pirates were already prepared. They were already holding weapons. At Blackbeard's command, 2 men, knife-wielding, charged forward, while 2 with guns pulled the trigger toward Lorraine. Bang! Bang! Lorraine abandoned his thrust, ducking and tumbling sideways. The lead bullet struck him where he had landed, but Lorraine had already tumbled to his feet, wielding a sword and slicing the head off one of the pirate guards. Blood gushed from the headless corpse like a fountain. Through this thin, blood-stained curtain, Lorraine, Blackbeard, and the other 4 returned to their initial standoff. "It seems you've considered a battle with me." Blackbeard stood up, his face sullen. "I admit I underestimated you, but have you ever considered why I'm here playing with you instead of going to the poop? Because of that Zheng Anyue, right?" Lorraine waved his sword with a dull smile. "Hannah said you have a powerful shadow warrior under your command, skilled as both a guard and an assassin. I wanted to see him for myself, but unfortunately, Hannah wouldn't let me get involved." "Hannah, your assassin." Even with the combined might of both sides' kings, the lukewarm battle on the forecastle still failed to become the focal point of tonight's battle. Berserkers have a natural knack for attracting attention. From the moment Leif went berserk on the main deck, the battle between the 2 stormtroopers dominated the entire encounter. Lorraine and Blackbeard looked at the battlefield, as did Nelson and Hannah in the poop. Nelson peered through the hatch window at the main deck. The focal point of the battle, the 2 stormtroopers had already been victorious, with Leif winning by a narrow margin. Both sides' injuries were essentially similar, Leif's leg, Chimaimu's shoulder. But for a normal man, a shoulder wound would have robbed Chimaimu of most of his combat effectiveness. Unlike Leif, who, as long as the wound wasn't fatal, simply adopted a more unconventional approach. The end of the Grand Admiral's battle signaled the return of the normal rhythm of warfare on the main deck. Chimaimu was shielded to the side, while Leif was tricked into a corner by Bardo. The sailors and pirates, each possessing a complex mix of emotions, engaged in a chaotic battle in the midfield. Their strategic advances and retreats, with measured advances, flank support, cover, and rescue efforts, completely overturned Nelson's preconceived notions about boarding battles. But there are certainly safer methods. Nelson couldn't see Lorraine's battle from his position, but he knew he was on the forecastle. Given his temperament, Lorraine probably wouldn't choose an opponent who was too easy. Nelson turned around and spotted Hannah, whose presence was minimal in the shadows of the cabin. The ship is a whole, and everyone has his or her own position. Officers, in particular, need to learn to perform their duties. "This is a basic course in the Naval Academy, teaching us when to be brave and when to be cautious," he said. "I've heard a little about Drake's reputation in the Naval Academy, but I don't understand why he is so obsessed with fighting in person." He closed his mouth after he finished speaking. Hannah had no intention of speaking either, and just played with the knife in that dark corner, as if she didn't exist at all. Nelson opened his mouth awkwardly. "Excuse me. Ms. Yesla? Pagan, your name is indeed Yesla, right?" Hannah then raised her head, letting a strand of hair slide down to cover her eyes. "Are you talking to me? Is there a third person in this cabin?" "Not yet, but there will definitely be one." Hannah smoothed her hair and looked straight at Nelson. "And your question is stupid. Lorraine is the owner of the pirate flag, not a soldier of the Union Jack. You mean the environment is different? No, Henna was not polite to Nelson at all. You can surrender if you are defeated, and the Navy will come to redeem you, but we can't. If we want hired sailors to be brave, we need to show our strength first, but I don't want to receive my price in the mailbox of the Admiralty, Nelson muttered, and suddenly thought of something. You are Drake's important fighting force, but this time you are staying by my side. Is it for that person who will definitely come? Yes, 10 muskets are guarding the Isle, and you have the advantage on the deck. How can he come? Use some method that the Puritans could not imagine. Henna lowered her head again. Your role today is bait. You just need to stay, and the fish will always be hooked. I am bait. Nelson was about to speak when a knock sounded at the hatch. Sergeant Six's voice excitedly reported from outside. Sir, the guards are ready. 3 rifles each. We're ready to strike at any moment. Excellent. The sergeant's report saved Nelson. He glanced proudly at Henna, his hand on the doorknob. Whoever you're trying to lure with me, heretic, that's not my job. Now it's time to do my job, to end this meaningless conflict the way it's meant to be, using naval methods. Click. The hatch opened, and Sergeant Six's figure slowly emerged, illuminated by the light of the lamp and moon. He stood in a strange position. His back wasn't straight enough, his neck held too high. Henna suddenly started, flipped over the round table in the center of the cabin, and kicked Nelson in the side. Watch out, swish. A flash of cold light. Chapter 359, Draw a Line as a Prison. A cold light flashed before Nelson's eyes, a faint, almost indistinguishable pink, shooting from Sergeant Six's throat straight into his eyes. Nelson had no time to react. Under the cold light, before his death, he felt no fear or panic, nor did he experience the preciousness of life again. He only stared in astonishment at Sergeant Six's dead eyes. Is Six dead? His question was destined to remain unanswered. Henna lunged forward with lightning speed, her long legs stretched straight, and before the cold light could reach her, she struck him hard in the side. Nelson was thrown unprepared, shattering the lockers fixed to the bulkhead, his eyes blackening. The cold light struck the air, and an inexplicable force propelled Six's body forward, tumbling towards Henna like a mountain collapsing. Henna carefully avoided the impact, dodging to the side and firmly wedging herself between the hatch and Nelson. Controlling the dead, learning human speech? I thought I could learn more useful things from you. Simplicity is effectiveness. Zany, a thin, childlike figure, entered the cabin, removed the 2 iron hooks from his waist, and crossed them across his chest. Our target here is Mara, but through interrogation, I seem to have learned some unexpected things, such as your employer being British, but you haven't given up on the assassination, because we don't choose our opponents, we only want Mara. Henna thought carefully and shook her head. Lorraine said Mara is very important to us. I can't give him to you. The answer is expected. Zany sighed regretfully. This time, the burden is on you, assassin, so, die. Before he finished speaking, Zany's figure suddenly took off. He ran across the cramped cabin, his small steps dividing the distance of just over a meter into 3 steps. He reached high speed in 2 steps, and the raised iron hook suddenly appeared before Henna's eyes as if teleporting. Henna bent down without hesitation. Legs immobile, shoulders wide, her waist displayed incredible flexibility, twisting her body into a bridge in a single breath. And she had no intention of completing the movement. Zany's swing hadn't yet concluded, her waist barely lowered enough to avoid the hook before she collapsed to her knees. From her knees, Henna leaned halfway forward, her bent back springing back up like a spring from hitting the bottom. Her arms, stretched out in front of her, slashed in front of her, hugging Zany's neck and lower abdomen. Lightning fast. But Zany's reaction was no slower than Henna's. His strike missed, and he spun around in a hooking motion, deflecting Henna's left blade with a single stroke. He raised his leg and clamped Henna's right arm with his sheen. Even after this, he still had one hand free, held high as if it had eyes in the back of its head. With a flick of his hand, his hook flew free from its grip, dragging the thin chain along with it, towards the stunned Nelson. Henna withdrew her left-handed knife. This withdrawal wasn't intended to strike, but to unseat Zany's balance. Without his support, Zany's body swayed slightly. In that moment, Henna used her right arm to push Zany forward, completely destabilizing the hook holding the chain. The hook flew sideways, glancing off the bulkhead, its thin, scimitar-like blade carving a long gash. It landed beside Nelson with a clang, causing him to shudder. Monster. Spending more time with Lorraine. Nelson found himself increasingly understanding the neutral word monster. He used to associate the word with characters from stories like dragons, griffins, cockatrices, and sea sirens. Now, the word became synonymous with Lorraine, Henna, Leif, the Indian who could fight Leif to a draw, and the childlike, middle-aged assassin before him. It felt more realistic, yet also more magical. But these men deserved such praise. Nelson had witnessed firsthand how the middle-aged assassin and Henna had barely moved during that brief, intense fight. The cramped cabin left no room for movement or combat, so they confined themselves in a dizzying array of attacks and defenses in the tiny space near the hatchway. And this wasn't about killing each other, each was targeting him. One wanted to kill him, the other to protect him. Nelson suddenly felt a strange sense of honor. Look, when a monster tried to kill him, God immediately sent another, unbeliever monster to protect him. But, why did the monster want to kill him? Nelson cleared his throat, gritted his teeth, and rubbed his waist as he stood up. I'm sorry, although it may be a bit inappropriate, but from my understanding, you don't seem to be allies of the Spanish. Zheng glanced at Nelson coldly. Yes, we are not allies, Mr. Colonel. Drake said that the pirate Blackbeard attacked the Spanish Port Authority villa. Can I understand that we have a common enemy? No, Mr. Colonel. Zheng retracted the thin chain of the hook and clicked it shut. I told the little girl that we don't choose our enemies, we only pursue what we need. What do you need? No comment. Nelson was silent for a moment. The arsonist Wilford, a Liverpool native, a big pirate, has a lot of blood on his body, and enjoys a reward of £575 from the Admiralty, ranking 7th among all pirates in the Caribbean. Zheng raised the hook. You want to say that you know us well, Mr. Colonel? You want to say that after this time, you can make us have no place to stand on the sea? Every navy says so, but you have never done it. Nelson waved his hand. No, 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 Mr. Pirate with superb skills. What I want to say is that in England, the navy and pirates are not always enemies. Blood debts are not a big problem. After all, even the king can pardon Henry Morgan. You want to reconcile? Zheng narrowed his eyes in surprise. At this time, I know you're on board, but you don't have the upper hand. Nelson pointed at Henna, then pointed outside the cabin. In this cabin, you seem unable to break through Majesla's defense, and on the main deck, the brave Indian was also defeated by Mr. Erickson. Poor Sergeant Six is the problem between us. He has followed me for a long time. He has been my captain of the guard since the Badger. He is very loyal and I like him very much, but this time he caused Drake's displeasure. Before you boarded the ship, Drake even asked me to consider punishing him. Now he has died for his country. After I return, I will write a report for him that can highlight his bravery and ask the Navy Department to consider his pension and compensation for his family at the highest standards. Although it is inappropriate to say this in front of his body, his sacrifice has maintained my friendship with Drake. Enough. Zheng interrupted Nelson forcibly. What exactly do you want, Mr. Colonel? I want to cooperate. Nelson straightened his military uniform and sighed unwillingly. We are facing a problem. There is a trouble floating on Lake Nicaragua, and you are excellent and should be able to provide us with considerable help. What can we get? As Ms. Yesla said, Major Mara is very important for us to solve this trouble, and the honor of a gentleman does not allow me to hand over a real nobleman to pirates. But you can at least contact him and ask him under our supervision. If he has what you need, as long as Drake does not object, you can even take the things away. These are my conditions. In my opinion, they are quite generous conditions. Nelson smiled. In that case, Mr. Assassin, I look forward to your answer. Chapter 360 Chips and Value. The sounds in the cabin were strange, and the soft singing and humming easily made people imagine something else, and they couldn't help but wonder what Blackbeard was doing to Mara in there. This is a profound philosophical question. In order not to disturb the elegance of both parties, Lorraine, who was the supervisor of the talks, consciously chose to avoid it, giving human nature enough space to be liberated. He stood bored in the aisle, leaning on the railing, looking at the deck. The late-night battle was over, and fortunately, the losses of both sides in this battle were not heavy. As the defending side, Drake lost 3 sailors in battle, and Nelson lost 4 guards in vain. Among the sailors, there were no long-term sailors who were regarded as the backbone of the Chamber of Commerce. There were 2 non-commissioned officers among the guards, and the highest-ranking one was Sergeant Six, who had long been labeled a mediocrity by Lorraine. The attacking Blackbeard suffered greater losses. 12 pirates died in all. 3 perished during the boarding, 1 was beheaded by Lorraine on the forecastle, and the rest were killed in the battle between Leif and Zheng Anyue, who, in their panic, plunged headfirst into the ranks of Drake's sailors. They ultimately became fodder for this illicit affair. Lorraine and Blackbeard both understood that to defeat their opponents tonight, they would have to be prepared to bear a greater price. But here, on the Spanish-owned shores of Lake Nicaragua, both sides had a low tolerance for casualties. The only sensible course of action was to seek friendship. Furthermore, this hypocritical, unsecured friendship needed to last until the conspiracy against the Granada envoys was resolved. To make it appear sincere, both sides did their utmost to express goodwill. On the darkened deck, the pirates, under Zheng Anyue's command, worked with Drake's sailors to clean up the mess. In the ship's doctor's office, Zheng Anyue and Leif comfortably enjoyed the top-notch medical care provided by the royal alchemist. The pitiful Mara was also part of the goodwill. Lorraine accepted Nelson's suggestion and allowed Blackbeard to meet his captive first. Although he gave up observing, Lorraine had a pretty good idea of what the meeting would cover. So after meeting Mara, his next move will be to clamor for a meeting with Tiresias, 3 parts coincidence, 7 parts deliberate. Lorraine uttered this soliloquy just as Nelson wondered over. His words really aroused Nelson's curiosity. You gave up eavesdropping, but you still know what they will talk about. Obviously, I know. Lorraine showed a mysterious smile on his face. More importantly, I don't regard these as secrets. If Blackbeard could be more sincere from the beginning, he could easily know everything by asking me. Nelson's eyes sparkled. I smell the scent of secrets. Tell me, what on earth do the Spaniards have that makes the pirate king flock to them? A spring, fountain, of course. The only spring with such magical power is the Fountain of Youth predicted by Herodotus, which has been popular in the Caribbean for centuries. Youth. Nelson was stunned and took a long time to digest it. How could a dignified pirate king believe such nonsense? So you think this spring is nonsense? Do you believe it? It doesn't matter whether you believe it or not. Lorraine shook his head in boredom. It's just that there are legends about it everywhere in the world, and countless explorers die for it every year. Even if it is to commemorate those brave and greedy souls, I would rather support its existence before someone proves that it doesn't exist. Then do you want to find it? Nelson completely turned the tables and asked, following up on Lorraine's words. Lorraine thought seriously for a while. Probably not. Really not. I said that I don't regard it as a secret. This at least proves that my soul does not value the privilege of transcending life and death. But no matter how you look at it, I always feel that it is calling me. Since I came to the Caribbean, it has never left me too far away. That's an illusion. Nelson seemed to have never been so serious in his impression. He kept shaking his head and admonishing Lorraine. Drake, time is a precious gift from God to mankind. Birth, aging, sickness, and death are all treasures of our existence. I feel that every letter of the legend surrounding that spring reeks of chaos and evil. It's a misfortune sown by pagans and demons, a fate that will haunt anyone who attempts to find it. But am I not a pagan? Don't be ridiculous. You know that's not what I mean. Lorraine surrendered. Every Puritan is inherently stubborn. His late father was, Shaq was, and Nelson, clearly, was too. Lorraine raised his hands high, a playful smile, sincere. Okay, Colonel, you've crossed the line, but I still want to assure you that whether this spring exists or not, I will not seek it out of greed. I hope you can calm down now, see the pros and cons clearly, and judge its value to us, now, rationally, not emotionally. Nelson frowned deeply. Now? Us? Value? Blackbeard. Lorraine smiled and nodded, cleared his throat, and began to recount his scattered thoughts of the past few days. As a preliminary statement, as we were not expecting such a situation, and given the lack of intelligence, my next words will contain a lot of assumptions and conjectures. This is the main reason why I didn't mention this in my letter to you a few days ago, but now, we need to decide whether to believe them. Last October, 3 parties in San Carlos joined forces to wipe out a pirate king and his pirate fleet on the San Juan River. This news came from Mara's oral account and was confirmed by Tiresias. The pirate king was Thomas the Fly, a devout believer in the Fountain of Youth. I guess Thomas came for the Tiresias family's research materials on the Fountain of Youth, because other than that, San Carlos has nothing of value enough to attract pirates. Tiresias's guess is similar to mine, but unfortunately, we don't have the testimony of Thomas himself. This is the first key point today. The small city of San Carlos has gathered 2 fanatical enthusiasts of the Fountain of Youth. One is Baron Tiresias, whose family has devoted generations to this cause, and the other is our pirate king, His Highness Thomas the Fly. Then comes the second key point. After Thomas's death, or perhaps even when he was alive, a secret rumor circulated in the Caribbean. The secret claimed that he knew the location of the Fountain of Youth, or at least the key information related to the location, which was recorded in his logbook. I haven't collected this secret from any channel. It may have been spread by another fountain enthusiast, it may have been spread by Thomas himself, or even by Tiresias after he obtained Thomas's diary. The purpose was to lure more people who had explored the Fountain of Youth into the trap. This is not important. What is important is that, combined with Mara's oral account and Blackbeard's actions, Blackbeard is obviously here for Thomas's diary, and he knows nothing about Tiresias. From this, we can see that we now have at least 3 chips in our hands, enough to buy Blackbeard's life. The first is his opportunity to meet with Tiresias. This chip can cost us the least, but we are not familiar with Blackbeard's questioning style, and we don't know if Tiresias has told us everything. If the situation gets out of control, we may lose a useful pawn and create a troublesome enemy for ourselves again. The second is a copy of Thomas's logbook. It is in the hands of Tiresias and will soon fall into my hands. This chip is worthless and is the safest way to buy your life. Of course, because there is only one copy, we can't expect Blackbeard to be a solid fighting force. The third is a copy of the Tiresias family research materials. This is a derivative of the second chip. Adding it to the other side of the scale is enough to make the copy invaluable. Blackbeard will go crazy for this, and we don't need to worry about whether he will work hard in the next action. The only problem is that after this battle, if he doesn't die, and he digests these copies, I, who have the original copy, will definitely become his next target. How to weigh it, Colonel? I'd like to hear your opinion. The long narration came to an end, and Nelson blinked blankly. Drake, have you figured out these days, most of them were delivered to my door? I said, it's like the Fountain of Youth has been calling me. I'm just curious why you insisted on keeping the original. In fact, you know very well that it means huge risks. Nelson asked the point. Lorraine was silent for a long time, then reluctantly replied, I'm a businessman, Mr. Colonel. So I know that things can only reach their full value when they are of equal value to both parties. If we act like we're treating them like trash, then even if Blackbeard is foolish, we shouldn't expect a high price in the end. Chapter 361 Priceless. After nearly an hour, Blackbeard finally concluded his meeting with Mara. When the hatch opened, Lorraine was greeted by an indescribable stench of sweat. Then he saw Mara, unharmed, slumped on the ground, his eyes glazed over, his face pale. Did you scare him? Lorraine asked unhappily. I simply chatted with him about some past experiences, some executions, and some pleading. He seemed to believe that you allowed me to deal with him as I pleased, so he was particularly empathetic and cooperated with me to talk about a lot of topics that I didn't expect, such as, at this point, Blackbeard paused coldly, boy, you are actually British. I have always been British, but I thought you were Spanish, a naval officer, or the head of the guards hired by Mara. Lorraine shrugged roguely, this sounds more like your problem, Your Highness. Cautious people are accustomed to understanding their goals before taking action, and you are obviously not the case. I believe more in fog shattered by force. Blackbeard took a deep breath, trying to calm down, but at least after we reached peace, you had plenty of time to confess your identity to me, instead of letting me meet Mara like a clown, and almost ruined the whole conversation because of ignorance. Is this a sign of weakness? Wait until I cut off your head. I swear, I will show weakness to it sincerely. Then there's no room for negotiation. Lorraine stamped his foot and turned. Your Highness, not all fogs can be shattered with a sword, just as Mara is my captive, and that Baron Tiresias also happens to be my captive. The San Carlos, fully packed, set sail again for the lake shore. However, as part of the battle, her role had long since degenerated from a timely helper to mere icing on the cake. It was unavoidable. Blackbeard's assault delayed support from the land for over 2 hours. During this time, Major Spencer had already found a way to breach the bunker's hull on his own. The heavy Spanish coastal artillery deployed along the city walls and the waterfront. These 12 to 18-pound guns were considered entry-level heavy firepower for land use. Since they were never intended to be portable, they were made of the cheapest cast iron, lacking tracks or carriages, making them unwieldy and bulky in practical use. Such artillery would be useless in conventional warfare, but in the current situation at San Carlos, It unexpectedly proved a formidable weapon. The British had breached the city, leaving the Spanish with limited forces to hold the northern wall. The Granada grenadiers and the sailors abandoned by Marat proved helpless against Spencer's line and light artillery. They were quickly forced into the bunkers, where they relied on their sturdy ramparts to hold out. They completely ignored the militia outside the bunkers. These militia, stationed in the various artillery batteries, were the Spanish's most crucial hope for victory, but they were never properly commanded. It was only when Spencer focused on the battery's firepower that he dispatched a single company on a scattered raid, seizing the wall's powder magazine intact. The battle was now unpredictable. Spencer had artillery, guns, the powder and projectiles to power them, and his men were energetic and high-spirited. The Spanish had nothing but vision. In a devastating sight, they watched helplessly as the British turned their guns, a dozen heavy guns, emitting plumes of gunpowder, hammered aimlessly against the bunker. Again and again. The militia barracks built atop the bunker were first razed to the ground, the flames igniting the surrounding buildings. As the fleeing civilians swarmed toward the bunker, Spencer did not intervene. Instead, he observed the flow of people from a distance and located the several entrances and exits. Then, at 2:40 a.m., the impact points began to converge, focusing on the partially concealed gun emplacements scattered throughout the barracks, sheltered by the officers' quarters. At 3:25 a.m., the San Carlos joined the ground attack, intensifying the barrage and putting even greater pressure on the Spanish hunkered down in the bunker. At 4:30 a.m., the last partially concealed gun emplacement collapsed. At 5:15 a.m., at sunrise, the Spanish surrendered, marking the end of the Battle of San Carlos. Amidst the smoke of battle, the final change of ownership took place. At daybreak, the San Carlos remored at the plank road it had left the night before. Nelson, Lorraine, and Blackbeard disembarked and met a weary yet excited Spencer on the ramshackle dock. "Sir, we have fulfilled our mission. The Spanish garrison at San Carlos surrenders in its entirety, with 672 prisoners captured and 27 wounded. Local doctors have been requested to provide intensive care for the seriously wounded. Thank you for your service, Major. Our army has fought a brilliant battle," Nelson complimented with due courtesy. Spencer nodded heavily. "Yes, the great victory depends on the courage of the soldiers. In this battle, our good guys advance under heavy artillery fire. 3 warriors gave their lives, and 7 people were injured to varying degrees. This is war, Major. War is ruthless. As commanders, we must mourn and accept the change," the two of them sang and shouted as they set up a straw stage. Blackbeard beside Lorraine raised his eyebrows when he heard it. "Boy, are all British officers so shameless? Even I heard that it was you who blew up the Spanish main arsenal and captured their commander. Your Highness, the colonel and the major are discussing the formal battle report." If translated more bluntly, the major asked whether the army could be used as the main body of the report. The colonel replied to him that if the army's casualties were reported as the main body, they would not be large enough and needed to be properly expanded. Blackbeard's eyes almost rolled to the sky. "Then what are you fighting for? Benefits, fame, favors?" "There are a lot of things I can get." Lorraine tilted his head and thought for a while, "but because the formal battle report will eventually be submitted to His Majesty, the value of mercenaries needs to be skillfully erased and only placed in the battle report submitted to the military. After all glory belongs to our king." Shameful politics. The ending came out, and Lorraine continued to watch the show with peace of mind. Who knew that not long after he watched it, Blackbeard came up again. "Little Drake, regarding my meeting with Tiresias, it seems like we just parted ways on this very topic 2 hours ago." Lorraine looked at Blackbeard gloomily. "I thought you'd be more patient, at least, you'd go through the colonel, Nelson, that cyst." "Of course I've talked to him," Blackbeard cursed bitterly. "But he said Mara was a condition for cooperation, and he's in a position to convince you to hand over your prisoners. But Tiresias wasn't part of the prior agreement, and Mara was too exhausted during our last meeting." Exhausted, those were his exact words. Lorraine was deeply impressed by Nelson's harshness. But he had to suppress his laughter and remain calm, carefully considering a feeding plan for Blackbeard, to ensure that this reckless shark wouldn't bite back at his enemy. He was silent for a long time. "Your Highness, the fountain of youth." Blackbeard's eyes suddenly flashed blood. When the flash of blood suddenly appeared, Lorraine happened to look away, his voice light and smug, as if he hadn't noticed Blackbeard's abnormality at all. "Of course I know what you're looking for. After all, Tiresias is my prisoner. Unlike you, I don't need anyone's permission to see him, and I assure you, he has nothing to give you anymore. Everything he has is mine. This is the ransom to buy his freedom." Blackbeard gritted his teeth. "Tell me, how much do you think the ransom should be?" "The ransom is priceless, Your Highness, just like youth is priceless." Lorraine smiled and turned around. "Priceless things are not sold, but only given to true friends at the right time." Chapter 362 A Fair Choice. We have a little trouble. After the ceremony of claiming credit, the group came to the Port Authority's lakeside villa where many stories had happened. In the study where Lorraine and Mara were attacked by the hunting soldiers, Nelson informed the beaming Spencer of the latest news received at night. Drake captured the commander of the garrison here, Baron Tiresias, and the captain of the San Carlos, Major Mara, and got an unexpected news from them. The re-election of the San Carlos administrator, originally scheduled for May 5th, has been brought forward to May 1st, which is the day after tomorrow. The day after tomorrow. The huge shock directly put Spencer's smile on his face, looking strangely funny, and people couldn't laugh at all. It was already very tight to complete the cleaning of the battlefield traces before the 5th, and you suddenly told me the day after tomorrow. I suggest that we immediately abandon San Carlos and escape into the jungle to seek assistance from the Mosquero people. Help us evacuate." "Yes," Spencer said solemnly. "President Drake did a good job, or rather, too good. He almost single-handedly destroyed the fort's solid defenses, leaving them completely powerless last night. But it's also because he did such a good job that the Spanish will regard this defeat as an insult. They won't let us retreat safely back to the coast. The San Juan River is impassable. Only with the help of the mosquitoes can we escape through the jungle." Spencer was full of momentum, riding on the momentum of last night's victory, wantonly flaunting his decisiveness. But to Nelson, this mediocre decision was far less attractive than Lorraine's plan. He was an adventurer at heart, with a clear goal, self-confidence, and greed. He was unwilling to admit failure, but also unwilling to give up the achievements he had made. He also refused to give in. "But Major, this means that Operation Leap of Fame will be cut in half. Major General Darling is still working tirelessly to coordinate the Navy and Army in Kingston, and he may have paid a huge price. How can we explain to him if we retreat like this? The Major General is not a persistent person. Do you want to use his weakness to excuse your failure? Damn it. You know that's not what I mean." Spencer grabbed his hair irritably. "Please calm down and think about it. In just 2 days, we will show Granada a ruined San Carlos. The streets here look like they have just experienced an earthquake. The roads in the West City are twisted and the houses in the East City are collapsed. If you were a nobleman in Granada, would you drive your ship ashore after seeing such a scene?" Nelson shook his head slightly. "No, neither can I. I will just turn around immediately and summon Granada's army and warships. Do you think we can stop this huge armed force? Or do you think that the Spanish rule in Nicaragua is in jeopardy and we can easily overthrow it?" "Neither, Spencer." Nelson crossed his fingers and supported his chin. "Drake and I have the same judgment as you. If Granada sees the current state of San Carlos, we will have no choice but to escape an embarrassment. But Drake has a plan. In order to enrich the trump card of this plan, we even won over a Caribbean pirate king on the lake last night." "What plan can?" Spencer's voice stopped abruptly. As if he had not realized until then that the ferocious man with a beard who followed Lorraine was not one of Lorraine's many magical sailors. He was the most cruel and warlike pirate king in the Caribbean, a pirate king wandering on Lake Nicaragua. "Damn it. Freeman told me Lake Nicaragua is teeming with sharks. Is that true?" Time flew by, and 2 days had passed. On the vast expanse of Lake Nicaragua, a slender, new-style, fifth-tier galleon, sails half-rigged, sailed leisurely across the waters. She was the Majestic, the youngest member of the Granada garrison. Last year, she belonged to the infamous pirate king, Thomas the Fly. A major battle had made her a prize of the garrison fleet. With her appealing name and new design, she quickly became the new lover of the fleet's commander, Rear Admiral Mara. Everyone knew it was only a matter of time before she was officially appointed flagship. Perhaps once the San Carlos leadership transition was complete, the fleet's flagship replacement would be on the agenda. Her destination this time was San Carlos, carrying the 2 most powerful men in Granada to assert their authority and seize profits. Those 2 men now stood at her sleek bow, one in an army uniform, the other in a navy tunic. Admiral Mara was playing with a new toy his nephew had given him a few days ago, a small hourglass carved from natural crystal. He said with a smile, "Your Excellency Governor, in more than an hour, the beautiful lakeside pier of San Carlos will appear before us. I think it's time for you to give me an answer about my proposal a few days ago and your reward." "Your Excellency, the Admiral is so impatient." Major General Hawthorne, the governor of Granada, fiddled with his wineglass. This time, Major Mara's contribution is obvious to all. The evidence he collected allows us to justifiably kick these dirty settlers out of the management of San Carlos and let this fortress made of gold return to your Majesty's arms completely. He deserves praise. Hawthorne expressed his attitude with emphasis. The key is, what are our common interests, the Navy and the Army, the garrison fleet and the colonial governor's office? Is it just 1 or 3 years of tax revenue? Or make full use of this opportunity to completely clear the settlers' power out of the rotation? If you are looking to the future like I am, honestly, do you think your nephew is capable of protecting our common interests? Admiral Mara snorted heavily. Francisco's performance this time is enough to prove that he can shoulder this heavy responsibility. On the contrary, your spokesperson, Major Oviedo, look at his mediocre performance throughout the whole process. When Francisco was attacked, he actually chose to stand by and watch. This is prudent, Your Excellency, Admiral, and it is also a trust in Major Mara's personal ability. Then please continue to trust him. Admiral Mara waved his hand. The right to distribute taxes this year will be handed over to the governor's office, and this and the next fortress commanders will belong to the garrison fleet. This is a fair choice for everyone. This should be considered the most stupid report. The argument was interrupted by a hurried order. The first mate on the ship ran over Paoli and reported to the 2 most powerful people in Granada, and even the entire Nicaraguan colony. A brigantine ship was spotted 5 kilometers northeast. It's been confirmed to be Major Mara's San Carlos. She's damaged, and the deck looks. The first mate gritted his teeth. She must have just experienced a brutal boarding. You mean San Carlos, boarding. Chapter 363 1001 Nights. Steady, steady, hold the boat steady, cast the grappling line, close. 10 meters, 5 meters, 3 meters, hold the foreshore sails, drop the anchor. Stormtroopers, jump overboard for inspection. All ship to level 2 alert. Admiral, command, load guns. Command after command echoed over the Prosperity. Following the command, over 200 officers and men aboard frantically rushed to engage the nearby San Carlos. The San Carlos was in a strange state. She drifted on the calm lake, just over an hour's distance from San Carlos, strategically located, yet desolate. Her decks were clearly occupied. At least 30 or 40 uniformed sailors lay sprawled in every corner, languid and motionless, as if on the brink of death. What had happened to these people? The Prosperity became extremely cautious, and the sailors' level 2 alert was treated to the intensity of level 1. First came the maneuvering. The original plan to board the ship was cancelled. Considering the relationship between Major Mara and Admiral Mara, the captain of the Prosperity even acted without prior notice, having his first mate drop anchor before addressing Admiral Mara. By the time the Admiral learned of the situation was already settled. The 2 ships were anchored 3 meters apart, hooked to a line and supported by a boom. The Prosperity's high freeboard loomed over the San Carlos, hovering over the abyss, preventing the San Carlos from drifting away or even approaching. A large number of sailors, 70 or 80 in total, poured out of the hold and formed a line alongside. Each pair aimed their rifles at a figure on the opposite shore, each cocking their hammers. Then, a charge of 30 brave men swung over the side of the San Carlos, swinging on ropes. Their search, and the continuous transmission of news from the San Carlos, filled the Prosperity's crew with awe. As the lookout had judged, they had indeed just fought a fierce battle. The casualties on board were heavy, and every survivor was exhausted. These men were undoubtedly truly heroic Spanish sailors. Most were swathed in bandages, stained with blood. The blood oozes through the cracks in their lopsided uniforms, stretching them outwardly, making them look utterly ill-fitting, like a makeshift wrap, utterly disproportionate to the wearer. The decks were a mess. Slashes were everywhere, smoke curled everywhere. The tall, pristine white sails tilted unsteadily from their yards, some still tangled, others limply unfurled, brazenly displaying holes and scorch marks to the majestic, catching the wind. Such was the horror. After such a fierce battle, such a thrilling experience, the surviving sailors were so exhausted they couldn't even lift a finger. Even when stormtroopers descended from the sky, their faces remained numb, unmoved. The captain quickly located several officers in the stern cabin. The leader, who introduced himself as the ship's second mate, Ensign Alejandro Diego de Lopez, a tall, dashing Castilian noble from Andalusia. He was immediately brought aboard the Majestic and presented before Admiral Mara and Governor Hawthorne. Admiral Mara frowned and looked at him. "You are, report to the commander. Alejandro de Lopez reports to you, Lieutenant Lopez." Admiral Mara exhausted his memory but still couldn't find this person's life, so he could only say regretfully, "Please briefly introduce yourself first." "Yes, sir. My official title is the second lieutenant mate of the San Carlos, in charge of drill orders. Because the first mate died heroically in battle last night, I was entrusted by the captain to temporarily take over the position of the first mate on the ship. Major Mara asked you to temporarily take over as the first mate." This news really surprised Admiral Mara. Almost subconsciously, the question came out, "When and how were you transferred to the San Carlos?" "It was 2 years ago, sir. To be more precise, I received my official appointment from the Fleet Command at 2 p.m. on September 17, 1778. Lorraine's voice was high and iron. "I am a graduate of the Barcelona Royal Naval Academy. Thanks to the care of my seniors, I was assigned to the garrison formation with the rank of sergeant upon graduation. Since then, according to the orders of the Fleet Command, I have served aboard the San Carlos. I clearly remember the day I arrived in Granada, and I and 19 other classmates were warmly entertained by you. The wine that day was delicious, and I have always remembered it, but I have never found a chance to express my gratitude to you, sir." "Oh. It's that little Lopez." Admiral Mara didn't actually remember the appearance or resume of any of the Lopezes, but he did have a habit of entertaining Barcelona Naval Academy graduates, and these were small, private family gatherings, the perfect way to prove their identities. The Barcelona Naval Academy was the foundation of the Spanish Mediterranean Fleet. The young people who graduated from there were naturally part of the Mediterranean Fleet system. Within the system, they were worthy successors and close associates. This made sense. Admiral Mara clearly remembered that while his nephew was away, he had specially selected a young and capable first mate and a corps of young officers composed of both Naval Academy graduates and descendants of pioneers. The first mate was a leader of the Grenadian pioneers, and the rank of captain was essentially his highest rank, posing no threat to his nephew's position. And if something happened to the first mate, given his nephew's personality, he would undoubtedly favor the outstanding Naval Academy students, even though doing so would not benefit his mediocre talents in the slightest. Regardless, Ensign Lopez's identity had been confirmed, and there was no possibility of an imposter. However, this also meant that the San Carlos had indeed been maliciously attacked on Lake Nicaragua last night. What exactly happened last night? Why would the San Carlos leave port overnight during this crucial transition of power, and why was it attacked after leaving port? The worst-case scenario, is the San Carlos still under control? Admiral Mara looked at Governor Hawthorne worriedly. Hawthorne stepped forward and said softly, "Young man, tell us the details of last night." "Yes, sir." Lieutenant Lopez held his chest high, but his eyes revealed a hint of reminiscence and confusion. "We were attacked last night," he said. "That might not be accurate. We should say San Carlos was attacked. There were signs of this attack. The captain was nearly assassinated in his lakeside villa. That night we caught a few living tongues, and we learned from them that the remnants of Thomas the Fly were planning a massive robbery, wanting to completely destroy San Carlos and avenge their leader." Hawthorne's eyes suddenly condensed. "What did you say just now? On the night Major Mara was attacked, you captured prisoners at the scene of the attack?" "Yes, 3. They only lived 2 days longer than the other thugs, but before they completely atoned for their sins to God, they revealed a lot of valuable information, but the letter the Major gave to the Admiral clearly stated that there were no prisoners." Hawthorne turned his head abruptly and looked at Admiral Mara intently. "Isn't that right, Admiral?" The Admiral sneered. "Mr. Governor, you were a guest at my headquarters when the letter was delivered. We opened the wax seal together, remember?" Hawthorne let out a deep breath, and his expression suddenly returned to a pleasant one. "I apologize for my earlier gaffe, Admiral. You know, this is a significant error," he said briefly, turning back to Lopez. "Please continue, Lieutenant." "Yes, sir." Lopez carefully recalled what he had said. "The interrogation yielded important intelligence. The captain told us that this information must be kept strictly confidential. If leaked, the consequences would be disastrous, especially to Baron Tiresias. The captain has unique channels, and there are signs that Baron Tiresias has a deep and long-term cooperation with the pirates, so the captain only told this news to Major Oviedo. What? Oviedo knew too. Yes, Lopez said without hesitation. He was the first person besides us to know. If he hadn't told his subordinates, he would be the only one in the entire fortress who knew. It was he who suggested concealing the information from his superiors. He believed that the pioneers' infiltration of the two key points, the admiral's headquarters and the governor mansion, had reached a pervasive level. Reporting this information would mean that this information would be presented to Baron Tiresias' desk immediately. The admiral and the governor both wore solemn expressions. Admiral Mera eagerly asked, "What happened next?" "Last night, the Watergate Tower was attacked first, and Major Oviedo was assassinated." "Oviedo's dead," Lopez nodded heavily. "After his death, fires broke out in many parts of the fortress, and the captain was assassinated again. He was forced to flee the port overnight under our escort. On the way to Granada to report, we were ambushed by a pirate ship." Admiral Mera immediately caught a flaw in Lopez's words. "It's the dry season now. What kind of pirate ship could sail from the Caribbean Sea into Lake Nicaragua?" "Sloops. 3 sloops in total, 1 large and 1 medium. They were unarmed, but they were filled with elite and ferocious pirates." Hawthorne, seeing the situation, interjected, "A mere 3 sloops could put the San Carlos in a difficult position. A rudder was sabotaged by a conspiracy." Lopez said indignantly, "The purpose of the saboteur is very clear. It is obvious that they are preparing to completely occupy the San Carlos fortress. Moreover, the ultimate goal is likely to take advantage of the two commanders' ignorance of the current situation and capture them in San Carlos." "Tiresias, he dares." Admiral Mera slammed his palm on the desk and clenched his teeth tightly. Perlo, Lieutenant Colonel Perlo, the captain of the Shangxi, immediately responded outside the door. Lieutenant Lopez said that the rudder of the San Carlos was destroyed. "Send someone who is good at swimming to verify it. Regardless of whether it is true or not, report back immediately." "Yes." Chapter 364, adding more foot to the snake. Lorraine's house arrest had lasted for about half an hour. In the cabin where he had been interrogated earlier, he closed his eyes for the third time and re-examined the rationality of his previous statements. The timing was right, the position was right, the motive was right, the development was right. And Lorraine's character, Lieutenant Lopez, was not a fictional character. Like Ruel, he was a real person, and none of his identity information was fabricated. The real Lopez was the 4th son of an impoverished Andalusian viscount, a native of Castile, and the top scorer in the sailing and cable-carrying class at the Barcelona Naval Academy. He possessed immense talent and ability, but his lack of family background meant he remained a second lieutenant 3 years after graduation. He and Lorraine had strikingly similar black curly hair, but he was far less tall, and his eyes were blue. However, this minor difference was not a significant risk at the moment. Admiral Mera couldn't possibly remember the appearance of a mere second lieutenant. If he could, a distinguished second lieutenant wouldn't have remained a second lieutenant for 3 whole years. The real risk of this was whether the 19 classmates Lopez had mentioned to Lorraine were aboard the Majestic. Any of them could easily tell the difference between Lorraine and Lopez, and his disguise would be easily shattered. Perhaps he was under house arrest, perhaps because his trial in absentia was taking place in a nearby cabin. But the situation at the moment seemed unlikely. The Majestic hadn't ignored him in the past 30 minutes. Just 10 minutes earlier, a sergeant had arrived, bringing Lorraine hot water, broth, bread, and a small flask of rum, and also sharing the latest news on deck. The Majestic's docking with the San Carlos had concluded, and the sailors from the San Carlos had flooded onto the San Carlos's deck, gathering the scattered sailors like heroes and distributing hot water, bread, and rich broth, just as Lorraine was currently being treated. This news seemed to confirm that Lorraine had survived the investigation into his identity. Perhaps he wasn't being held under house arrest as he had imagined, but rather being left out in the cold. But according to Lorraine's story, the San Carlos was currently struggling under the combined influence of pirates and traitors. The Majestic, with its powerful firepower and carrying a distinguished guest, could easily turn the tide. They shouldn't have time to dawdle on the lake. What had gone wrong? Lorraine frowned, pondering. The men disguised as Spanish sailors were carefully selected by Nelson and Spencer from the British landing force, speaking fluent Spanish without a discernible foreign accent. Most of them were eager for the mission, and while their formation seemed haphazard, there was actually an officer in control for every 4 or 5 men. They shouldn't have revealed their true colors so easily. The damage to the rudder was also real. To trick the majestic and the distinguished guests aboard, Lorraine had personally engineered it. The damage was to the tiller, which connected the handwheel to the rudder. He had sawed it in half, then twisted the other half with brute force. The signs of damage were extremely obvious, yet nothing could be seen from the ship's exterior. Only by opening the aft bulkhead could one truly see the truth within. No one could have guarded against such deliberate sabotage. The San Carlos had fled port without warning, then had its rudder broken during the voyage, ultimately forcing it to fight. This story made sense, no matter what. And then there was last night's battle. Thinking of this, Lorraine finally saw the flaw. If this was a trap, 3 mixed sloops, both large and medium, could harbor 150 to 60 pirates at full capacity. The San Carlos had only 120 men at most. With a commander like Mara, there was no way they could withstand such an attack. He had accidentally overestimated his own strength. Lorraine quickly put himself in Admiral Mara's shoes, trying to understand what his mindset would be like upon hearing such an unrealistic battle report. First, Lopez was loyal, exaggerating his opponent to gain credit. Second, Lopez was disloyal. The San Carlos had already fallen, and those remaining on board, including Lopez, were assassins targeting the 2 nobles. Third, Lopez was strictly neutral. The battle was real, but it didn't end with the San Carlos victory. Instead, Lopez staged a mutiny and surrendered Mara, which bought him and the sailors safety. Adding unnecessary details, adding unnecessary complications. It seems it's time to activate Plan B. More than an hour later, someone finally led Lorraine out of the cabin where he had been confined for so long, across the plank, and towards the San Carlos. Lorraine saw the disguised sailors. Just as he had imagined, the sailors hadn't given away any clues and were well cared for. However, the people responsible for caring for them hadn't left their weapons with them and had artificially separated them, moving from the San Carlos to the Majestic, from deck to cabin, leaving them no chance to gather. This was already a very obvious sign of vigilance. Depressed, Lorraine followed the guide all the way to the stern cabin of the San Carlos, and finally met Admiral Mara and Governor Hawthorne for the second time in the captain's cabin. Admiral Mara's face was as hard as steel. He pointed to the stool in front of him and said to Lorraine, "Lieutenant Lopez, sit down." "Yes, sir." Lorraine still maintained the appearance of a tough soldier, straightened his waist, and sat down with his knees supported. "Don't be nervous, Lieutenant. It's just that the San Carlos is in danger. We still have a few questions we need to clarify with you." Hawthorne, who always had a smile on his face, was trying to smooth things over. He was flipping through what seemed to be Major Mara's logbook in his hand. "You said you had a big battle last night." "Yes, we were boarded by 3 sloops full of pirates at night, and we fought all night." "How many pirates were there?" "I don't know," Lorraine answered crisply. "In the cover of night, we couldn't estimate the number of enemies very well. We only remember that they were endless and could not be killed." "Then how many people were on the San Carlos?" "As the second mate, you must know." "Right, 120 sailors, 14 petty officers of various levels, 6 lieutenants, and 1 major, that is, the captain, a total of 141 people." Admiral Mara glared at Lorraine fiercely. 141 people, how many are left on the ship now? Where did those who disappeared go? Lorraine was well prepared for this. He cleared his throat and answered loudly, "There are 41 sailors on board now, 3 petty officers, 1 lieutenant, and 1 major, a total of 46 people. The rest, whether dead or alive, or those who were not taken away by the pirates when they retreated, have been pushed into the lake according to the captain's request." "Really pushed into the lake? I dare not deceive my superior." Lorraine found Admiral Mara's eyes with his own gaze, which were filled with indignation, sadness, strong self-loathing, numbness and indifference. "The rainy season is coming, the weather on Lake Nicaragua is hot, and our rudder is damaged. We don't know when we can escape from the current predicament of being isolated on the island. The captain is worried that the seriously wounded and the dead will spread the plague, so he asked us to clean up the ship before it rots. The soldiers hate this kind of labor. We murdered no less than 10 people, each of whom was a partner who fought with us last night." Admiral Mara was completely intimidated by Lorraine. When he didn't know how to end it, Hawthorne once again grabbed the match point. "It's strange, Lieutenant. You blame all the despicable things on your captain, but so much time has passed and we have searched the entire ship, but we haven't seen the captain himself." He looked at Lorraine with a sneer. I have always insisted on fairness and justice when governing Nicaragua, and treated the Spaniards and mosquitoes who live on the same land as fairly as possible. Under my authority, anyone can make accusations and defend their reputation. I only have one request, that the accusations need to be presented in court. This is the most basic of the basics. Do you have it? You must tell us whether Major Mara is alive or dead? Is he injured or intact? Where is he now? Has he been coerced, or has he been detained? To put it bluntly, while you were enjoying wine and broth on the Prosperity, the Admiral and I had already controlled all your men. Please hand over Major Mara immediately. This may win you the mercy of the jury. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 365 Plan ABC. Planning a kidnapping of local military and political leaders with limited manpower and resources within a limited time frame was, by all accounts, an act of madness. And that's exactly what Lorraine was doing. The first phase of Operation Reach the Sea focused on capturing San Carlos, while the second centered on smuggling across Lake Nicaragua and inciting rebellion in the Mosquito town of Managua, a key Spanish stronghold. Putting aside the challenges inherent in each phase, they faced two obstacles simply in transitioning between them. First, how could they secure the newly captured stronghold with a small force, ensuring that San Carlos remained under British control when the first heavy rains of the season ended and the San Juan River swelled? Second, how could they contain an overreaction from the Spanish colonial capital of Granada, preventing the Spanish from fully exploiting their regional military advantage? Lorraine saw the essence of these two disadvantages as the same: Granada's overwhelming military might, encompassing an entire grenadier regiment, at least one line regiment, and a powerful lake patrol fleet boasting over 150 guns. This formidable force lay directly between San Carlos and Managua, like a mighty dragon perched atop a mountain of gold, poised to awaken at any moment and unleash a blazing fire upon the petty thief named Nelson, who had stolen the gold coins beneath his feet. It presented an unsolvable problem. At least in Major General Linda's comprehensive plan, the contingency plan for dealing with it was extremely vague, lacking any implementation details. It contained only perfunctory and generalized containment and deception. It also suggested that, if a counterattack was necessary, inflict unbearable damage, and use deterrence to achieve a temporary peace. With all their empty promises, they didn't even know how long this temporary peace would last. Lorraine's kidnapping operation was essentially the first practical action plan based on this concept of temporary peace. The core of the plan was simple: to exploit the precious opportunity presented by the joint administrative transition in San Carlos, presided over by Governor Hawthorne and Admiral Mara, to kidnap all the Spanish naval, military, and political leaders in Nicaragua. Given the inherent lag in decision-making within a major power, and the unrivaled reputation of the Kingdom of Spain for this lag, the kidnapping would likely render Granada's vast military power leaderless for a prolonged period. Such an army would be able to defend but not attack, and when it no longer had the strength to attack, the short-lived peace the British hoped for would naturally materialize. The significance of this kidnapping operation could hardly be overstated. It would determine the fate of San Carlos, Granada's response, and ultimately the success or failure of the entire Operation Reach the Sea. The British landing force had given Lorraine full temporary authority, allowing him to mobilize British manpower, material resources, technology, and other material and non-material resources at any time. Even Nelson and Spencer were bound by his orders. Lorraine did not disappoint. In a single night, he and Blackbeard and a group of professional criminals devised 3 interconnected plans: Plan A, Plan B, and Plan C. Plan A was the most optimistic scenario. Lorraine would fabricate a story, replace a Spanish officer who bore a passing resemblance to him, and risk nothing by lying in wait just where the Majestic was bound to pass. This would create the illusion that San Carlos was in danger and only the Majestic could save it. Then, once they had lured the Majestic to San Carlos, they would block the plank road and force its surrender. They had a plethora of options, each one highly promising. However, perhaps due to their years of operating in a gray area, where everything had to be fought for, Blackbeard and Lorraine were skeptical that things would turn out in their favor. So, they devised Plans B and C. Plan B was a high-risk deception, while Plan C was a straightforward, almost unstoppable assault with no escape route. My two sirs, the captain is inside, in the bottom cabin of the San Carlos. Lorraine pointed to a watertight compartment that was obviously temporarily rebuilt and reinforced, and said so to Admiral Merritt and Governor Hawthorne. Admiral Merritt's face was so black that ink could drip out. Lieutenant Lopez, is this the prison you set up on the ship? It's not a prison, sir. Lorraine hesitated to speak. Forget it. No matter how I explain it now, you won't believe me. There's only one thing I can say. Please believe in my loyalty to Spain, and please believe in my love for my alma mater. In just a few words, Hawthorne's accompanying adjutant had already led people to inspect the entire outer wall of the cabin. He reported what he saw in Hawthorne's ear. Hawthorne was stunned for a moment and asked in disbelief, "The door of this cabin can only be locked from the inside?" "Yes," Lorraine nodded seriously. "The captain has been worried about his own safety since he was stationed in San Carlos. The San Carlos is the place he trusts most, so he carefully set up a shelter here. All the decorations in the cabin are similar to his study, and the hatch can only open inward, which is different from all the hatches on the ship. But why is the outer wall of a place that was built a few years ago? The shabby outer wall was rushed out in just one night and coated with thick glue. It looks like this watertight compartment was once soaked in seawater, but it was not carefully repaired and was abandoned as a result. This situation is not uncommon on ships. People who don't understand the condition of the ship will subconsciously ignore this cabin. Just like the soldiers sent by the two commanders to check the rudder, they passed by this cabin several times, but no one ever thought about what the condition inside is." Hawthorne opened his mouth weakly. "Major Mara has gone to such lengths to disguise the shelter. All you have to do, sir, is knock on the hatch. Once you see what's inside, everything will become clear." A short while later, the Admiral and the Governor-General prepared to knock on the door. Admiral Mara had intended to knock directly, but Hawthorne stopped him. He felt there was something indefinable about the tall Lieutenant Lopez. He didn't seem like a subordinate officer who obeyed orders. The aura he occasionally exuded reminded him of those powerful elites whose words were law. Like himself. So, even though Admiral Mara was frantic, even though the cramped watertight hallway seemed unable to hide anything, even though Lieutenant Lopez had adopted a cooperative attitude, accepting everything without resistance, he still took precautions. 20 elite stormtroopers from the Majestic rushed over to the hatch, weapons and swords drawn. Hammers ready. Hawthorne glanced at Lorraine. "Lieutenant Lopez, this is your ship. Explaining things to your captain is the least likely to arouse suspicion and distrust." Lorraine smiled wryly and nodded silently. He walked silently through the hail of gunfire until he reached the cabin door, straightening his back. "Temporary First Mate Lieutenant Lopez," Lorraine shouted. "Captain, Admiral Merritt and Governor Hawthorne have arrived. They're just outside the cabin. They wish to see you." There was no response from inside. Lorraine took a deep breath and repeated in a louder voice, "Temporary First Mate Lieutenant Lopez reports. Captain, Admiral Merritt and Governor Hawthorne have arrived. They are outside the cabin and hope to meet you immediately." Click. The hatch lock turned half a turn, and when the hatch was about to open, a timid voice finally came out of the cabin. "Low. Lopez, are my uncle and Governor Hawthorne here?" "Yes, Captain. The attack. Have the traces of the attack on us last night been cleaned up? In accordance with your wishes, everything has been cleaned up. The colleagues on the Shang-Chi provided us with great help." "Oh, I see. I have to go and thank the captain of the Shang-Chi later. Oh, before I replace him, it seems that we can be friends. Let my dear uncle step back a little. I want, no need to step back. I almost forgot. This door opens from the inside, and only I can open it." Chapter 366, No one knows nephew better than his uncle. The hatch creaked open from the inside, cautiously halfway open, revealing the bright lights and luxurious decorations within, and of course, little Mara's pale, frightened face. "Uncle. Uncle." Old Mara's expression had been gloomy all day, repeatedly breaking the line of ugliness, and now it was even more speechless. No one knows a nephew better than his uncle. He knew little Mara's character and tastes intimately. Even a vague glance revealed that this cabin, though appearances might not be the best guide, was decorated entirely to little Mara's taste. The thick, hand-woven carpet, the desk, the clock, everything exuded a well-maintained oldness, identical to little Mara's private study at the Port Authority Villa. Even the backrest of the single sofa bore bullet holes. Old Mara clearly remembered having a craftsman build an identical sofa for little Mara on his 23rd birthday as a gift, and little Mara treasured it like a treasure. A few days ago, little Mara wrote to say that the sofa backrest had been punctured by a bullet shot from a distant harrier. Who knew he'd even copied that very hole exactly into this cabin? How meticulous. By this point, old Mara was finally convinced he had a complete understanding of the situation. Lieutenant Lopez was clearly innocent. No kidnapper would go to such great lengths to build such an ornate cell. The expense and time required to custom make the furniture alone would have been too much for Lopez to bear. This meant everything Lopez had said was true. Fearful little Mara had prepared his own shelter years in advance, so secretive that even his uncle hadn't heard of it. Of course, little Mara might have rarely used the shelter before, but the recent spate of attacks had left a constant sense of uncertainty weighing heavily on him. Finally, with last night's massive pirate attack, little Mara finally broke down and went into hiding. Neither his uncle's visit nor the slander against his most important officer could convince him to leave this seemingly safe place of self-imprisonment. Despicable. Incompetent. But old Mara sighed deeply. The Mara family was small. 3 brothers of his generation had careers in the military, politics, and business, but only young Mara had survived to adulthood. Sooner or later, he would have to inherit the family title, and he would have to provide for his brothers in their later years. With such an irreplaceable position, even if he were incompetent, what could he do? The thought of this made old Mara lose interest. He glared at young Mara with annoyance. "You've been hiding here, right, since when, the despicable Torre? Oh, by the way, Tiresias contacted the pirates to attack San Carlos. Colonel Oviedo was assassinated, and I escaped aboard, and have been hiding here ever since." Young Mara delivered his lines with a measured, emotional voice, stuttering from his lack of preparation. Old Mara saw these unconventional practices as signs of his nephew's hopelessness, and he cursed him bitterly. "Last night, your ship was attacked by a large number of pirates. While your men were fighting bravely, you were hiding here." "My ship was attacked by pirates?" little Mara asked in surprise. Then, as if remembering something, he glanced guiltily at Lorraine. "Rule, you didn't tell me." "Rule?" Old Mara was taken aback. Lorraine rolled his eyes and expressed his dissatisfaction blatantly. "Captain, I am Lopez, not that damn flatterer, Rule. Even though we look alike. If one day you can call my name right, I will be very, very grateful." Old Mara looked at little Mara in disbelief. "You don't even remember the name of your second mate?" Right." Little Mara's forehead was sweating, and his eyes were evasive. "Rue. Lopez, were we attacked last night?" "Yes, and the rudder was broken. I reported all this to you when you drank your second bottle of cognac." "You reported it?" "No, we even broke the rudder. We have been rescued by the Prosperity, sir. It's just that most of the people on the ship died." Poor Rule, even his body was fed to the sharks. Lorraine's eloquent responses, Mara's clueless and foolish, conjured up a vision of a fierce, bloody battle in Mara's mind. He couldn't help but wonder if the San Carlos wasn't completely incapable of fighting. When their commander lost contact, they had shown more courage and fearlessness than any other ship Mara had ever commanded. This realization mortified Mara. He gritted his teeth and growled deep in his throat, "Enough. Come out with me." Mara's eyes fluttered, and he hesitated again. A vein in Mara's veins throbbed. "Why, you won't come out even if you see me." "No, uncle, that, sir," Lorraine suddenly interrupted. "Business is more important. I'll have Miss Seers taken care of." "See. Seers? Miss?" Seeing Mara's evasive expression, Mara finally decided to abandon his composure completely. "Absolutely, without a trace. You even brought a woman with you when you fled. You ignored your men's bravery, were disrespectful to your superiors, and only wanted to be with a woman. What a rebellious son." He kicked the hatch open, and Lorraine dodged unnoticed. Just as he was about to enter, Governor Hawthorne, who had been watching from the sidelines, suddenly said, "Lar, take 5 men to protect the Admiral." One of the gunmen took the lead, and with 5 men, they surrounded the completely out-of-control old Mara, each entering the cabin one by one. A strange, musty smell lingered. Old Mara frowned, searching the cabin. He saw no woman. Instead, on either side of the hatch, less than half a meter from young Mara, were 3 men tucked against the wall. One was a bearded man, wielding a serrated black blade, another was an Indian, one arm hanging, a large axe shouldered, and another was a massive, white bear-like figure, shield in one hand and a sword in the other, its sharp blade gleaming coldly. Lar, standing guard, was the quickest to react. His face changed drastically, and he raised his hand and held up the gun. Protect. Blackbeard moved. He raised his leg, took a step, and his fat body slid and turned in a circle. He swung the black blade lightly and slashed Lar's waist with all his strength. Lar was not even cut in half. He was hit by the big knife, but it was like being hit by a sledgehammer. His whole body was broken in half and flew backwards, hitting the wall of the cabin with a bang. "Welcome to the birdcage, Your Honor." The cabin door closed with a click. Old Mara looked at Little Mara in amazement. "Francisco, this is..." Little Mara laughed miserably. "I thought you could see my warning, Uncle, I really thought." Chapter 367 Persuading Surrender. The hatch closed. In the sealed cabin, 3 warriors whose life creed was invincibility faced off against 4 fragile, helpless sailors. There was no real suspense, not even a particularly intense confrontation. Yet, their cries grew louder and louder, their voices thundering and moving across the sea. Those awkward war cries faintly emanated through the scribbled bulkheads, like a brave warrior stumbling into a dragon's lair, or 300 Spartans gathering for a swim at Thermopylae. Is there any way to block his ears? Lorraine listened to the howling in the cabin with dismay, and couldn't help but wonder inwardly, why couldn't they speak authentic Spanish when casting Lopez? There are actually pirate kings in this world who can't speak Spanish well. Does the Sea Brotherhood never consider a candidate's education when selecting a candidate for the pirate kingship? It seems that's the case. Lorraine sighed regretfully. The people in the cabin had their joys, but he also had his troubles, like, he was being pointed at his head by 15 loaded spears. If he didn't get things done quickly, he might miss dinner. He raised his hands high, palms open, like a peacock, showing his harmlessness to the Spaniards. "Mr. Governor, I guess the current situation is somewhat beyond your expectations." "Actually, it's not that unexpected." Hawthorne squinted his eyes and looked at Lorraine. "Unlike Mara, I have a pair of eyes that can discover excellence, so from the first time I saw you, I was wondering why an outstanding young man would not get the opportunity to be promoted. I am really flattered by your words. That's the compliment you deserve." Hawthorne smiled calmly. "Young man, you still have a chance. Please release the Admiral and his good nephew now. Please trust that I can control the violence at the scene. You can surrender to me. My status and appreciation can be the greatest guarantee for you to change your ways." "It's really a tempting suggestion, Mr. Governor." Lorraine smiled and was about to refuse, but heard Hawthorne speak at the right time, accurately blocking the opportunity for him to show his cards. "Don't be anxious, young man. I believe that the people you ambushed in the cabin will not harm our Admiral at will. In this case, you have plenty of time to think about it carefully. As long as the Admiral is not injured, everything can be salvaged." "Do you mean not to let these 15 spears continue to point at my head?" "If you want, I can do it," Hawthorne said with a smile, facing 15 powerful firearms in a small space. "I know you must have something to rely on, but blind self-confidence is not desirable. When I was on the battlefield, I saw countless confident people, and they eventually became corpses that no one cared about, really. I guess, self-confidence and arrogance are often indistinguishable, that's the truth. Please take it as advice from someone who has been there, it will benefit you for a lifetime. Empty principles can't benefit me for a lifetime, Mr. Governor." Lorraine suddenly stopped laughing. As his smile faded, an unbridled sense of dominance and murderous intent emanated from his every gesture. Though these were intangible and invisible, the gunmen imagined they were witnessing a hungry, bloodthirsty jaguar poised to pounce on its prey. This made the gunmen nervous, and one of them accidentally pulled the trigger. The hammer fell, and the gun rang out. The lead bullet flew from the long barrel, transforming into soft, scorching liquid, and shot towards Lorraine's forehead. However, Lorraine seemed prepared for this situation. He took a leisurely half-step to the side, easily dodging the sudden and close attack. "You're breaking the rules, Mr. Governor," Lorraine argued relentlessly, his superhuman agility and casual demeanor attracting the attention of all the frightened people. The entire lower deck was focused solely on him, completely unaware of the 2 enormous spiders that silently slid down from the dark ceiling. The 2 spiders, one on each side, one male, one female, one short, one tall. They performed seemingly similar rappelling maneuvers, upside down, but anyone observing them would notice their movements were completely different. Zheng Anyue's movements resembled those of the Special Forces soldiers of later generations. His arms were open and completely horizontal, his upper body completely free of contact with a rope, his legs entangled in it, like an inverted cross. Hannah's were the opposite. Her legs formed a uniquely beautiful diamond shape, with only the soles of her feet merging to stabilize the rope. This meant she primarily used her hands to rappel, her silhouette like a true spider, using the darkness above as its own web. These two living fossils of warrior styles were so unique in every way, yet miraculously they always managed to achieve the same ultimate goal, stealth. Lorraine finally stopped complaining, put away the intimidating knight, and put on a friendly smile again. I suppose I shouldn't expect a Spanish gentleman to show mercy when facing his enemy. He stretched his arms lazily. 15-1, it seems, unlike the battle inside the cabin, you still feel you have victory, and you're standing in a safe position. Hawthorne tried his best to suppress his pride. I wait for you to see the situation clearly. Not only you, but also the scoundrels you've ambushed in the cabin. However, my patience is limited. What if something stepped on Hawthorne's shoulder? Hawthorne froze for a moment, and just as he was about to look, his raised neck was gripped by a curved, cold iron object, completely enveloping it. It was Zheng Anyue's weapon. The thin shadow warrior descended from the sky like a spirit clinging to a human shoulder, firmly planted on Hawthorne's left shoulder. A pair of curved, unsealed iron hooks silently extended from left and right, locking in opposite directions. Don't move, sir. You'd better not move at all, and don't say a word. My hook is sharp. Any movement might damage your delicate skin, allowing the venom on the hook to penetrate your bloodstream. Believe me, you never want to know what the venom will make you feel. Hannah also moved. She loosened her hands, her body falling naturally. In the limited space of less than 2 meters, she turned over and launched a volley of sharp throwing knives. 6 red velvet-wrapped knives flew out like flowers from the sky, drawing streams of light in the corners of people's eyes, and accurately and simultaneously pierced the vital points of the vests of 6 gunmen. Silently, without a trace, her movements were almost synchronized with Zheng Anyue. It was not until the body fell to the ground and Zheng Anyue's devilish muttering that the others suddenly realized. Someone turned around. In the moment when the gunfire was scattered, Lorraine suddenly started, opened her huge hands, and grabbed the heads of 2 sailors on the left and right. With a bang, they slammed heavily in front of her. It seems the number of people has suddenly become 7-3. Lorraine slowly drew the sword from his waist and swung it twice, tearing the air. Mr. Governor, will you surrender voluntarily? Or will you surrender voluntarily after I kill them all? Chapter 368 Balance. Capture the king. With the king captured, all else is over. Western gentlemen, far superior to their Eastern counterparts, are adept at choosing and sacrificing. Especially when their cherished interests conflict with those of the king, life, and treasure, they always know which to choose. The bodies scattered across the floor were dumped into another empty watertight compartment. Little Mara, temporarily freed, delivered a message for Big Mara, summoning all officers above the rank of colonel to the San Carlos. Then the colonel summoned the lieutenants summoned the petty officers. The entire process proceeded without a single bloody fight. Blackbeard and his men simply blocked the aisle, and the judicious Spaniards, without exception, surrendered. Almost half an hour later, Little Mara returned, leading Blackbeard and Zheng Anyue, along with representatives of the colonels, lieutenants, and petty officers, to the grandeur, announcing to the more than 200 sailors on board that the ship had officially been transferred to the Drake Chamber of Commerce. They could choose to sail to the British port of San Carlos, where the British promised not to take them as prisoners. Alternatively, they could disembark there, where President Drake generously provided them with a boat, charts, and enough food and water for the journey back to Granada. At 4 p.m., the Majestic, having endured so many setbacks, finally completed its planned journey for the day, arriving at the San Carlos lakeside dock carrying 2 Spanish rear admirals, 8 majors, 26 lieutenants, and 144 sailors. Nelson fulfilled Lorraine's promise, rewarding each sailor who assisted in steering the ship with an 8-cent gold coin. The officers were properly transferred to the prisoner of war camp, where they shared dinner with the captives of the San Carlos siege. Thus, the first phase of Operation Reach the Sea finally came to an end. In the final days before the rainy season, they only had one last major task before them, the ultimatum. This ultimatum was not the typical final ultimatum of war, but simply a formal announcement to inform the Spanish of the end of the war. As for the reason, it was naturally to ensure the Spanish's right to be informed of the situation, lest they, unaware of the fall of San Carlos, blindly decide to attack without their leader. Therefore, the ultimatum was crucial, and its content must include the following points: inform the Spanish that the British had successfully captured San Carlos. Inform the Spanish that 77 nobles and officers, including Major General Hawthorne, the Spanish colonial governor of Nicaragua, Major General Mara, the admiral of the Granada garrison, and Baron Tiresias, the commander of the San Carlos fortress, had been captured after their heroic battle. Inform the Spanish that they could make a formal request for negotiation at any time with Major General Darling, the British colonial governor of Jamaica, the Army headquarters, or the British Foreign Office. Don't contact the Navy. This operation has nothing to do with the Navy. The person delivering the ultimatum was also crucial. Neither mercenaries like the Drake Company nor natives or individuals of unknown origin like Blackbeard, Nelson and Spencer were also unsuitable candidates. Their positions within the army were too high, making them easy pawns for the Spanish. Their ranks were also too low, as junior officers lacked diplomatic experience and could easily turn appeasement into a demonstration, irritating the fragile and sensitive pride of Granada. After several rounds of selection, Freeman volunteered and was chosen. Lorraine selected Blackbeard's beloved ship, the Lucia, as a means of delivering the message, with Leif, Chamoyam, and Zania as escorts. Nelson also selected a lieutenant colonel, 2 captains, and a second lieutenant from among the captives. These were needed both to verify the authenticity of the ultimatum and as gifts to ensure that there would be grateful friends in Granada. On May 3, Freeman set sail from the lakeside pier. Watching the sail fade into the distance, Spencer suddenly patted Lorraine's arm with a sigh of relief. "Major, what are you doing?" "Thank you, Drake, thank you." Lorraine was completely confused. "If it's something that happened during the war, this is my job when I was hired. I didn't do it reluctantly, and I have already received the corresponding compensation. It has nothing to do with the war." "Drake, I mean Freeman, Lieutenant Freeman? What happened to him?" "This operation has made him grow a lot. He is a completely new person, a completely different person." Spencer's voice was filled with deep emotion. "He took the initiative to ask me for the task of delivering the ultimatum. The reason was that he is my brother-in-law and is of noble birth. Both his personal identity and his status in San Carlos are enough to make the Spaniards feel his sincerity." Lorraine raised his eyebrows. "If he intends to act honestly, it will create many unnecessary risks. He said that at worst he would escape into the woods. With Erickson there, he believed that the Spanish could not stop him." Spencer laughed. "Do you know what reward he asked me for? Promotion? Or transfer?" "He's going to retire." The answer was completely unexpected, and Lorraine exclaimed in surprise. "He plans to retire after making great contributions. He wants to get on board, not as a navy, but as a sailor." Spencer looked into Lorraine's eyes. "The reward he asked me for is that he hopes I will ask you to allow him to become a member of the Drake Chamber of Commerce." Huh? Lorraine was stunned for a while. "I think I need to think about it. I'll wait. You can tell me the result at any time." After speaking, Spencer turned and left, and Blackbeard came up instead, staring at Lorraine with a nose that was not a nose and a face that was not a face. "Boy, it's been 5 days. I took risks for you, fought for you, lent you precious cotters and ships, and accompanied you to carry out that meaningless ultimatum. I have paid enough, and now I just want to know when my reward will be redeemed. The information is lying somewhere on Pasatla Island, not with me." Lorraine replied with a twist of his neck. "Your Highness, according to the weather in previous years, it will take about a month from the beginning of the rainy season to the stabilization of the hydrology of the San Juan River. During this period, we can't do anything. We have plenty of time to go to that beautiful island to complete the final handover. What do you think? Will you follow me to the island, or wait for me to deliver it to your door in San Carlos?" "Of course I'll go to the island with you." Blackbeard's nose was emitting hot air. "Who knows if you will delete important information from the copy? People always need a little trust between each other." Lorraine teased. "Since you are going to the island, in order to avoid some unpleasant things from happening, please choose your entourage, limited to 3 people." Blackbeard widened his eyes. "Where's the trust you just mentioned?" "I ask you to trust me, because I'm a successful businessman who values my reputation as my life, and I've received an orthodox English aristocratic education. You can't ask me to trust you, because your family is just self-employed farmers, and you're known for your capriciousness, greed, and cruelty. This is the fairness we must abide by in our cooperation. I need to trust you, but you don't need to trust me. Is that fair? Yes, that's fair. Lorraine smiled contentedly. Just like we couldn't handle Granada's counterattack, so we took the initiative to pay attention to the Spanish right to know. True fairness is never about the two ends of the scale, but about balancing the imbalance by adding weights. In short, when the rainy season arrives, only one ship will go to Pasatla Island, and that's the Prosperity. If I accidentally discover another ship with the same destination during my voyage, I will sink it, adding the necessary weight to achieve balance. Lorraine used his hands to imitate the swing of the scales, and suddenly a drop of water fell from the sky and hit the back of his hand. He couldn't help but interrupt the conversation and looked up at the low, overcast sky. The rainy season has begun. Chapter 369 The Root of Irritability. Outside, heavy rain fell like a curtain. Standing in his elegant study, Lorraine twirled a corner of the curtain and stared blankly at the view. Henna, what day is it today? May 23rd, so this rain has really been going on for 20 days now. This is Pasatra Island, one of the thousands of islands in Lake Nicaragua, located northwest of the largest island, Amapad Island. It's considered a large island in terms of area and ecologically suitable for habitation. Freeman's mission went smoothly. Leif praised him highly, saying that his arrogant manner before the Spanish was very Celtic, not at all like a effeminate English man. Lorraine probably took this as a personal compliment. Anyway, after 2 days of his mission, he returned to San Carlos and officially completed the retirement procedures. Lorraine gladly accepted this highly developed young man. Next, he and Ko would attend the Chamber of Commerce school together. Now, he and Lorraine had sailed on the Prosperity to Pasatra to receive the other half of the spoils of this operation. That was on the 6th. 20 days passed in a flash, with relentless rain and relentless wind. Lake Nicaragua, a mere freshwater lake, had taken advantage of the weather to swell to such a degree that even the undermanned Majesty found navigation difficult. Lorraine and his crew were stranded on the island, losing contact with Nelson. Frustrated. Lorraine didn't know why he was so irritated. Life in Tiresias's mansion should have been comfortable, with ample supplies and manpower. Pasatra Island was beautiful, and even in the pouring rain, its scenery was unique to each season. Even Blackbeard, with whom Lorraine had a grudge, had left. When Lorraine arrived on the island, he was alone, accompanied only by the still wounded chasseur Nacion and a pirate sailor. The sailor was there to assist him in the navigation of the beloved Lucia, while Nacion was there for his education. This remarkable chasseur, a distinguished history graduate from the Royal Pontifical University of San Jeronimo in Havana, had long been Blackbeard's trusted advisor in archaeological and forensic research. And he was truly talented. After spending 2 days thoroughly examining the copies of Thomas's logbook and the Tiresias family research materials provided by Lorraine, he borrowed about a third of the original Latin draft documents, and concluded, first, the authenticity of the materials was unquestionable. Second, Tiresias's deciphering was flawed, making the original more valuable for research. This conclusion immediately irritated the fickle Blackbeard. He demanded that Lorraine hand over the original, threatening a pirate war and making the Drake Guild's presence in the Caribbean impossible. This was a serious threat of war. Lorraine swore he had considered sending the original to ward off disaster. He was skeptical about the Fountain of Youth and had no interest in immortality. The problem was that Blackbeard spoke these words from the stern of the beloved Lucia, and then, braving the wind and waves, the ship sped out of the Majestic's range, giving Lorraine no chance to react. And so, war began. Following Cotton Jack, the Drake Guild and the Second Pirate King entered a state of war. Thinking of this, Lorraine suddenly felt that perhaps this was the reason for his irritability. After all, Blackbeard had already escaped, but he was trapped inland. Chuck and others knew nothing about the new enemy. And it was very likely that Blackbeard would seize the opportunity and cause huge losses to the Chamber of Commerce. He threw down the curtain and said, "Henna, I plan to leave first, cross the lake." Henna tilted her head and thought for a while. There are too many islands and reefs on this lake. As you said, with the current manpower, the Shengshi is likely to run aground on the way back, so you stay and wait for the storm to subside. I will take Leif and a few experienced sailors and sail the boat back to San Carlos. Why? Henna always asked so bluntly that there was no room for evasion. Lorraine scratched his head in embarrassment. Didn't Blackbeard declare war on us? I need to bring the news back as soon as possible, that's it. Henna expressed contempt with an expressionless face. I asked the sailors to pass the news back on the day Blackbeard left. If it were you at ordinary times, you should have noticed that one of the boats on the Shangxi was missing. Lorraine widened his eyes. You asked someone to send the news back a long time ago? This is basic procedure. Carmen told me that you rarely pay attention to these most basic matters. If she is not here, I have to keep an eye on it. Carmen again. Lorraine opened his mouth, always feeling that there seemed to be a lot of secrets between Hina and Carmen that he didn't know about overnight. He couldn't help but ask, anything else? I mean, besides the dress and the assistant job, what else did Carmen tell you? Choose secrets. Choose what? Carmen told me not to tell you everything, but to keep a few secrets appropriately, so that life can be a surprise. Huh? Just by looking at the style, Lorraine knew these words were Carmen's original words. When Hannah quoted them, her expression and tone remained blunt, full of incongruity. This gave Lorraine a bad feeling. Well, what did you choose? Everything, Hannah said matter-of-factly. Since secrets are good, they should be kept, like a flying knife, the more hidden, the better. Hannah had delivered the news of the war. Now that the most urgent task he could think of had been completed, Lorraine no longer had any reason to fret. Operation Reaching the Sea was a long road ahead, and although he still felt restless, he had to force himself to calm down. Island tours were the best thing to do right now. Pasatella Island was actually quite interesting. As one of Lake Nicaragua's most ecologically and geographically favorable islands, it boasts a long history of human habitation. The Mayans flourished here, establishing cities and civilizations, towering temples, and vast stone walls and statues. The Tiresias family once believed it to be the location of the Fountain of Youth. Consequently, a century ago, the grandfather of the current Baron Tiresias went to great lengths to purchase the island from the Miquiquito elders of Managua for 1,000 kilograms of smoked meat, and then acquired full ownership of the island from then-governor of Nicaragua for 600 Spanish gold coins. Landing as the undisputed master with 35 musketeers, he eradicated the remaining civilization, massacred most of the indigenous population, and enslaved the remaining few to build a mansion and a dock. Under the guise of indulgence, he secretly embarked on his explorations. Until now, all of this has become Lorraine's property. Gazing at the ancient ruins covered in vines, Lorraine whispered Tiresias' name. Baron, after 100 years, have you found the Fountain of Youth? Tiresias twirled his umbrella cap with a look of dismay. We gave up long ago. By the time of my father, the family expedition had completed its final exploration of the caves. 4 men died, and we still found nothing. It turns out my grandfather's location was wrong. The Fountain of Youth isn't here. It's most likely in the Bay of Honduras or Bimini Island. Lorraine's face suddenly turned strange. The Bay of Honduras and Bimini, yes. The legend points to the Biwa Pool, unknown outside of Jerusalem. The Fountain of Youth is almost certainly in Central and North America. The most likely locations are right here and in those 2 magical places. Lorraine truly didn't know how to express his feelings. He had initially joked with Nelson that the Fountain of Youth was calling him, but the fountain expert told him that there were 3 most likely locations for the Fountain of Youth, one he had captured, one that was now his legal property, and one he was about to attack. Was this a joke of fate? Without any warning, Lorraine felt a surge of anger in his heart. Baron, I have a proposal. Oh, this inland island carries the history of your family, but it is worthless to me. You have used it to redeem your freedom. If you still have enough wealth, I am willing to redeem it to you. Tiresias' eyes lit up. Really? Including those valuable research materials? No, you misunderstood. Those materials are the subject of my war with the Blackbeard. No matter how high your price is, I will not sell it until we decide the winner. I am referring only to this island, including the land, houses, docks and slaves, only 5,000 pounds. It's really great value for money. Tiresias almost lost his composure. Think about San Carlos. The British won't own it forever. Lorraine smiled and patted his shoulder, but he still had something to say. Don't forget that I'm a businessman. Every offer must be worth something. You can tell me the answer at any time before the rainy season ends. Tiresias took a deep breath. Don't think about it, President. An urgent cry interrupted Tiresias' words. Freeman ran over from the heavy rain, soaked all over, and with no manners at all. President, San Carlos has an urgent message. The colonel fell ill. My brother-in-law wants you to bring Dr. Solander back no matter what. If it's too late, I'm afraid. Lorraine didn't listen to the rest of the words. because he finally found the source of his irritability. The land of war, the spread of rain and heat. This is the plague's favorite stage. Lorraine could even shout out its ominous name. It was one of the most terrifying rainforest killers of this era, chronic tropical disease. P.S. Chronic tropical disease is a general term for a series of chronic tropical parasitic diseases. Of course, microbiology was not well developed in that era, and it was impossible to know that it was a series of different diseases, but it was regarded as one disease. Chapter 370 Plague City. Steady, steady. Open the oars, don't panic, hold your own. Hold your own and you won't capsize, Bardo's cries echoed through the storm. On the shores of Lake San Carlos, a small boat struggled to rise and fall amidst the raging wind and driving rain. They had already completed most of the journey. If they only had to reach the shore, they would reach their destination. However, the rising waves, swept inland by the wind, smashed against the shore, creating a turbulent current that retreated and tangled in all directions, weaving together vast and unpredictable eddies along the shore as they advanced and retreated. The speeding boat dove into the current, only to be pushed back less than 20 meters from shore. There, it was caught in the eddy, leaving them to be tossed and thrown, thrown and thrown, thrown and thrown. Lorraine stood at the bow, arms folded, his feet fixed as if on nails, despite the strong wind and fierce waves. Bardo, get Daniel to shore safely and don't let the boat capsize. Yes, a sharp wave hit the boat, crushing it head-on. Bardo wiped the water off his face with great effort and shouted to Lorraine. Captain. I plan to abandon 4 oars and lock the oars to the side to improve stability. At the same time, I will have the sailors go into the water and use manpower to push the boat out of the whirlpool. This is your problem. Lorraine adjusted the belt of his sword. You need to think about it yourself. Bardo was horrified. You are going to. I've waited long enough. I want to know the situation in San Carlos as soon as possible. That's our retreat. Another big wave hit him, and Lorraine suddenly drew his sword, holding it with both hands, leaped up, and slashed. Water and iron exploded like a cannon, and the waves shattered. As they hit the waves, Lorraine's voice reached the boat. Leif, let's go. All right. A few minutes later, 2 large fish leaped from the water with a splash. Strong arms grasped the embankment and, with a single lift, lifted Lorraine and Leif to shore. The lake shore was quiet. The devastation of war was still evident. The paving stones were uneven, the delicate fountains no longer flowed, and the beautiful flower beds, once teeming with blossoms, were now covered with hideous cracks. Thick yellow mud seeped through the cracks, soaking everything in a filthy mess. But the changes compared to 20 days ago were stark. Tall wooden watchtowers overlooking the lake had been built atop the 2 widest plank roads. The shore defense batteries were operational, and a dozen or so light and heavy artillery pieces had been added to the embankment, covered only with simple cannon tarpaulins and tarpaulins to protect them from the rain. The gun awning was crudely made, and through the wide slits, Lorraine could see piles of projectiles and gunpowder, indicating that the place was in a state of war, of course, to deal with the possible threat from Granada. What made Lorraine most happy was that he saw the Red Army uniform standing guard on the dock, taking shelter from the rain. The dock was a key bridgehead in the fight against Granada, but it was by no means a key location for the town. The fact that Spencer's soldiers were there at least showed that order in the town was still in place, and it was far from developing into the situation that Lorraine was most worried about. He breathed a sigh of relief, stood up and left his hiding place, and walked casually towards the nearest lobster soldier. The sentry was very alert. Although the direction of his surveillance made him face Lorraine sideways, and although the wind and rain around him obscured the scattered noise, Lorraine only took 3 steps before he swiftly raised his gun and turned around. Hold still, sir. Tell me who you serve, he demanded loudly. It's been raining for over 20 days. No one would stroll along this lake shore in such awful weather. Lorraine frowned. If I were you, I wouldn't show such obvious hostility until I was sure I had control of the surroundings. Before he could finish his words, Leif charged from the other side, shield raised. His large feet slammed into the uneven flagstones, shattering puddles and cracking the bluestone. Each step felt heavy, and his speed was immense. The sentry spun hastily, but before he could pull the trigger, Leif's shield rose, pounding the barrel of the maritime commuter's rifle into knot. Number, soldier. The sentry sank to the ground, gritted his teeth, and remained silent. Lorraine strode towards the gun tent where he was taking shelter from the rain and looked at him. You asked me who I served. I'm Lorraine Drake, a mercenary hired by the Royal British Navy for Operation Reach the Sea. I serve Colonel Horatio Nelson, the Commander-in-Chief of Operation Reach the Sea. Do you understand? The sentry was dumbfounded. Mr. Mr. President. The troops became ill 14 days ago. A soldier fainted while building a watchtower. We didn't think much of it at the time. After all, such heavy rain was unbearable. We were in the heart of enemy territory, with war brewing in front and behind us. It's normal for a few people to have mental breakdowns. In fact, he wasn't the first soldier to faint on the job. The Port Authority villa was the temporary residence Nelson had requisitioned for himself. Lorraine hurried up the stairs accompanied by Spencer. All the way, Spencer recounted the ins and outs of the plague. We discovered that he was different from the unconscious soldier before him on the third day after he fell ill. Generally, soldiers under excessive mental stress will show improvement within 1 to 2 days, but he didn't. He became more and more seriously ill and soon developed a fever. The day he had a fever, 7 other soldiers fell ill. 4 of them were in the same barracks with him, 2 were his personal friends, and the last one was an orderly I sent to take care of him. The plague spread because of this. The third group of people fell ill, followed by 12, 9, 22. In just 14 days, I have organized 37 funerals. There are still 91 people in the barracks who are bedridden, and 33 have mild coughs and fevers. The doctor here refused to serve us, and your ship's doctor is the only doctor we can find right now. I tried to contact you since the day the third group of people became ill, but the wind and waves on the lake were too strong, and we don't have enough soldiers who are good at boating. It seems that I need to fill out 6 more death notices. Right, I'm afraid so. Lorraine and Spencer paused in front of Mara's bedroom. Your men just found me this morning. I paddled for 3 hours in the wind and waves to get here. Is the colonel in there? He's in there, Spencer nodded. The orderly is getting us protective clothing. No need. Tropical diseases aren't highly contagious. Anyone who gets them is an idiot. And that guy in there is no exception. Lorraine pushed open the door with his boot and saw Nelson, thin and pale, lying in bed. Whether woken by Lorraine or because he hadn't slept in the first place, Nelson quickly opened his eyes and looked at Lorraine with red, bloodshot eyes. You saw me, he said. Am I in bad shape? Very bad. If I don't get treatment, I'll probably die here, Lorraine said matter-of-factly. It seems that you are very dissatisfied with my illness. Nelson smiled bitterly. Yes, tropical diseases. Every tactical manual related to the rainforest has information on how to deal with it. I should have been prepared, and I shouldn't have given the disease a chance to spread from the beginning, but it did spread. Lorraine recalled for a moment. The major said that the plague has killed 37 people, infected 91 people, 33 people had symptoms, and 6 people disappeared on the lake while looking for me. Your troops have lost the ability to attack. What are you going to do next? What to do? God doesn't seem to want to see me gain real merit. Nelson smiled bitterly. I feel weak, my hands and feet are cold, and my lower abdomen is cramping. I can't sleep, and as soon as I fall asleep, I see countless ghosts lurking around me, biting my flesh and blood, but no one is willing to tell me why God hates me. Drake, do you know? Lorraine's face was full of weirdness. Colonel, are you going to let a pagan judge your beliefs? Do I? Nelson was stunned for a while, as if recalling his previous words. It seems that I'm really confused. Drake, before he could finish his words, Spencer, wrapped in a protective suit and looking a bit like an astronaut, walked in. Drake, your ship's doctor and sailors are here. We'd better let the doctor see the patient first. We can chat about the rest after the captain is out of danger. Chapter 371, Premature Death. My opinion is to divide the barracks into 3 or 4 platoons as an independent unit, and set a time for handing over duties during special periods to reduce or even isolate the contact between units. Set up a large pot inside the unit. High temperature is the simplest and easiest way to disinfect. Even if we can't boil people in iron pots, all utensils must be boiled in boiling water, especially tableware and clothes. Take a bath. Our soldiers must take a bath, and patients are no exception. If there's enough wine, use the wine to disinfect the dormitories. Then there is excretion. Excretion must not be carried out in the dormitory. Each unit uses an independent toilet. Excrement must be cleaned out of the barracks and buried every day, and lime must be sprinkled on it before burial. Finally, there is the daily ethics of the barracks. Drinking raw water and eating raw food are not allowed. Wash hands before and after meals, and change clothes every day. Prostitution is strictly prohibited during leave. Locals may not be prone to tropical diseases, but it does not mean that they will not become carriers. At this juncture, we cannot take the risk of connecting to new sources of disease. While Daniel was diagnosing Nelson, Lorraine and Spencer discussed the epidemic prevention plan in the empty study. San Carlos was very important to them. It was not only a bridgehead for continuing the offensive, but also the ultimate way out and retreat. However, the British Army was now so weakened that it had almost reached the bottom line of maintaining the stability of the town. Before Daniel found a suitable treatment, preventing the number of patients from continuing to increase became the top priority. In response to this, Spencer did a lot. He isolated the sick soldiers, set up disinfected wards, and assigned special people to take care of them. What Lorraine needed to do was to open up ideas for him and further reduce the risks. After listening to Spencer's basic introduction, Lorraine began to talk incessantly, combining some epidemic prevention methods heard in later generations, but more of them were tricks used on the ship to prevent the spread of the disease. Spencer wrote them down one by one, and occasionally interrupted a few times. After the discussion concluded, he handed the plan to his aide-de-camp and asked Lorraine, "How's Freeman doing?" Lorraine's mind faltered. "He's healthy. There's no outbreak on Pasitra Island, no. I know your men aren't sick. I was asking about him on your ship." Lorraine suddenly realized, he's a landlubber. Even if he could swim, it wouldn't be of much use anytime soon. I had Bardo teach him to swim like a real sailor. He's starting to learn. This nonchalant attitude seemed to delight Spencer. I hope he's chosen the right path this time. It's definitely one that's more lucrative than becoming an army officer. As for the rest, I can't guarantee anything. The two were chatting when a weary Daniel pushed open the door. Lorraine, observing his expression, suddenly had a bad feeling. How is our commander-in-chief? Probably a curse, a curse. Putting aside the mystical descriptions, Lorraine could roughly deduce that Nelson's illness was likely a parasitic infection. Daniel couldn't pinpoint the type. That would require a blood sample and microscopic examination. However, this gadget, invented by the Dutch over 100 years ago, wasn't popular. As far as Daniel knew, the nearest one was probably in Havana, and a little further away was Boston University. Far water cannot quench near thirst. Alchemy's understanding of parasitic diseases stemmed from the research of Aristotle, the ancient Greek scientist who knew everything and was wrong about everything. He believed that worms are not living things, and therefore cannot be killed biologically. Daniel proposed an alchemical treatment, an oral elixir made of mercury and sulfur, which Nelson would take. The mercury's aggressive properties would completely destroy the vicious curse. Lorraine's face turned pale at this, and she asked weakly, "How much mercury is needed for the elixir?" "About 10 grams. I carry enough, but I can only make 3 doses of this medicine at most because it requires ivory powder from Africa, and I don't have much on hand, ivory plus sulfur plus mercury, and 10 grams of mercury." Lorraine was fully confident that most of the parasites in Nelson's body would be killed, but if nothing unexpected happened, Nelson would die sooner than the parasites. Daniel's treatment plan was immediately rejected by Lorraine. Daniel was very sorry and said that conservative treatment required a lot of medicinal materials and time, and under the current conditions, he could only stabilize the condition at best. If Nelson wanted to recover, he had to return to Europe. Lorraine informed Nelson of the result. Nelson was silent for a long time and nodded slightly. "Major, please inform Major General Darling of my situation. It seems that I have to leave Operation Sea Reach. San Carlos needs a new commander. If we want to advance to Managua after the heavy rain, this sick and painful unit must also be reinforced. This is my last suggestion." 17 days later, on June 14, 1780, Major General Linda's messenger set foot on the land of San Carlos on the Blue Dew. After these days, thanks to Daniel's tireless work, the Army's condition finally stabilized. 70% of the patients, including Nelson, regained the strength to walk. The new ethics proved highly effective, with only 12 new cases and 3 deaths. The messenger expressed his gratitude for everyone's efforts and, in Nelson's bedroom, read Major General Darling's decision to Lorraine, Nelson, and Spencer. Nelson immediately returned to Kingston. After further treatment, he would sail aboard Colonel William Cornwallis's ship, the Prairie Lion, back to Plymouth and on to London for his final recuperation. Major Spencer and the soldiers who participated in the battle would be evacuated in batches over 40 days. 5 newly formed Mosquero companies would take over the defense. The new forces would nominally belong to the Mosquito Kingdom and had no connection to Great Britain. The employment contract was terminated, and the Governor-General of Jamaica offered a 25% tax break for 18 months, including this year and the next, as compensation for early termination. The Drake Chamber of Commerce was free to decide its itinerary, but Governor Darling expressed pessimism about the future of Anglo-Spanish relations in Nicaragua and recommended that the Drake Chamber of Commerce suspend all business dealings there. In short, Operation Sea Reach was aborted. Spencer expressed great incomprehension of this decision, and argued excitedly, "We have solved Grenada. God, we have solved the biggest trouble and captured 2 major generals. Managua is almost in our pocket. Why should Operation Reach the Sea be cut short at this time?" The messenger sighed regretfully. "The governor knows your success and efforts, Oliver. But the problem is not with the army, but with a navy that even the governor cannot control. Navy, Colonel Nelson having to return to the mainland is a huge loss for all of us." After his transfer order was made clear, the third phase of the operation could no longer find a naval commander with the right rank and ability. Colonel Cornwallis believed that sending his friend back to England was a more meaningful job than military exploits. Lieutenant Colonel Collingwood was not qualified to command battleships above level 4 and was not suitable to be the new commander. The remaining candidates were either rejected or in name only. The governor met with 7 people, and after discussing with Sir Parker, he finally gave up the action. Could it be that there is no, yes, none? The courier looked Spencer in the eye. The operations against San Carlos and Managua are all in service to Phase III. Without naval support, Phase III has no chance of victory, and continuing this war is meaningless. Go home. Stop shedding our soldiers' blood in vain. Enough has died. Lorraine heard a hidden meaning in the courier's last words. The epidemic had killed 46 people, and combined with the nearly 30 deaths previously, the massive non-combat losses were likely another major factor in Major General Darling's retreat. He exchanged a knowing look with Nelson, who stood up and applauded. "The war is over, gentlemen. Regardless of Jamaica's decision, we are the undisputed victors. Life is full of regrets, but they are also God's gift. I only ask you to remember these beautiful days. I only look forward to the day when we can have the opportunity to work together again. So, farewell, my friends." After the resolution, San Carlos entered into frantic rotation of defense. Nelson, whose condition had stabilized, departed on June 15, accompanied by a courier on the Azure Dew. Spencer would not return to Jamaica to resume his duties until the entire rotation was complete, around August. Lorraine returned to Passetra Island for another 10 days, doing only 2 things, releasing Baron Tiresias and signing the sale agreement for the Passetra estate. The estate was sold back to the original owner at a further discounted price of just £4,600. With both ends cleared, the sailors sent by Chuck to reclaim the warships arrived. The Majestic and San Carlos formed a formation and sailed into the swollen San Juan River. Standing at the bow of the Majestic, Lorraine suddenly felt a sense of directionlessness. What should he do next? Smuggling in New Orleans? Piracy in the Caribbean? They all seemed to lack a clear driving force. Perhaps, resting up in Lucy for a while. Last time, he'd gotten sick, even his body was protesting. He was just thinking about this when Daniel, with his usual poker face, approached Lorraine. "Captain, I heard you've obtained a large amount of information about the Fountain of Youth this time. Why?" Lorraine raised an eyebrow. "Did anyone tell you about this?" "I've been busy before, first taking inventory of the estate's assets, then treating patients and fighting the epidemic. I haven't been able to free up my hands to take a look at those so-called materials, then go and see. It's not a big deal. It's piled up in the bottom hold with those Mayan artifacts. I've seen it. It's very valuable." Lorraine raised an eyebrow and looked at Daniel with a strange look. "Daniel, you've aroused my curiosity. What is it that makes you hesitate to tell me?" Daniel cleared his throat. "Captain, I voluntarily give up the next 3 years' profits from New Orleans and the Chamber of Commerce in exchange for ownership of this information. That's a lot of money, for a half-hearted doctor and an unsuccessful royal alchemist. That's worth it." An unexpected answer. Lorraine stared at Daniel, stunned, and whispered, "Daniel, you never seem to have told me why you came aboard." "I will. If this yields any results, I'll need your help. I'll uncover my wounds. But that takes time." "I'll wait." Lorraine smiled. "The information is yours. You don't have to give up anything. I know your research costs money, just as much as Carmen's. Daniel bowed silently, turned, and left. Watching him from behind, Lorraine murmured to herself. The Fountain of Youth. I never thought I'd end up wading into this mess. Blackbird, are you looking forward to it? Volume 4, The Legend of the Fountain of Youth. And, P.S. The Battle of San Carlos is based on historical facts, including the causes, moments, and outcome of the war. However, Operation Reach the Sea likely didn't occur at the time. Given Britain's current situation, the Navy had no desire to seize the Gulf of Honduras, and the Army didn't have the capacity to mobilize the Navy. Also, the names of Mera, Tiresias, and Oviedo are all famous explorers obsessed with the Fountain of Youth. Just a little Easter egg. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 372, Friendship for Edward Kenway. Smuggling. Smuggling, the two-edged tyrant erects a beacon on the sea, bringing the dawn of freedom to North America in the darkest land. This was a Christmas gift from the inept poet Hamilton to Lorraine during his smuggling trip on Christmas Day 1780. The poem, woven from a fine oriental silk, is composed in a pleasingly beautiful cursive script and Hamilton's personal seal, reserved only for close friends. The poem is titled To Edward Kenway's Friendship, reflecting on the gains of freedom and devotion in the windy bay, a typical example of a series of sloppy works whose titles are longer than the text itself. However, this young man with purple eyes is America's brightest political rising star in recent years. He is not only a valued political ally of John Adams, but also serves as the Continental Army's chief purchasing officer in Baltimore, while also serving as Washington's aide-de-camp. In 1780, his procurement accounted for 72% of the Continental Army's total munitions, 37% of uniforms, 19% of medicines, and 7% of livestock and food reserves. He practically single-handedly equaled the Continental Army's General Logistics Department in Philadelphia, a feat that astonished the entire nation. He was destined for rapid advancement. Considering the poem's quality as a political investment, despite its inherent disdain, Lorraine framed it and hung it prominently in the captain's cabin of the USS Marker. However, now Lorraine felt that it might have been too prominent. After all, Alexander Hamilton wasn't George Washington or John Smith. At least in 1781, his signature was far from respectable. Today was settlement day. In the Kenway Company's water tanker in New Orleans, Count Galvez arrived uninvited aboard the USS Marker and visited Lorraine's cabin, unaware of his presence. Hamilton's poem immediately caught his eye. He read it with admiration, pondering the emotion, but the more he read, the more halting and disjointed his words became. It was only after the third reading, perhaps convinced that he hadn't missed any of the poem's deeper meaning, that he turned his head away in embarrassment. Kenway, this is a poem, it's a peace charm, a spell handwritten by an American wizard, with a magical effect of warding off disasters and difficulties. Since it was hung up, Deomark has not fired a shot for 8 consecutive months. It is the most powerful magic item I have ever seen in my life. Oh, it turns out to be a spell. Galvez wisely put the bad-tempered limerick behind him and walked to Lorraine's wine cabinet to pick out Chateau Margaux, the perfect Chateau Margaux, with ripe black currants, spicy vanilla and violet aroma. Kenway, you have successfully acquired a taste for wine. It's just expensive. Lorraine made a fallacy from the perspective of a farmer. Compared to making wine from grapes, I still think whiskey brewed from corn tastes better, especially Kentucky liquor. In my mind, it is the only good wine that surpasses the wine from my hometown in Louisiana. Galvez was amused and helpless. However, there is only a bottle of whiskey from Scotland in your wine cabinet. I can't see a single bottle of the wine from my hometown or Kentucky that you mentioned. They're in the kitchen. The real wine isn't for display, it's stored in oak barrels, ready for immediate consumption. This conversation had played out countless times between the two. Lorraine's Edward Kenway was cunning yet decisive. Possessing a peasant's keenness, a lack of refinement yet a masterful portrayal. Galvez often couldn't tell which was the real Kenway, the elegant and graceful or the brave and uncouth. But one thing was certain, if Kenway had been born into a more noble family, he would have been a truly admired gentleman, and through his superb acting, he almost achieved that. Kenway, do you know why I want to meet with you alone today? Probably because of business. Lorraine stood up, took the Margot estate from Galvez, opened it, and poured a glass for himself and him. Is our queen finally willing to expand the Continental Army's share of military purchases? I think she, as wise as she is, should have realized that now is the last golden age of smuggling. In a few months, the Americans may no longer need Charleville in France. Unfortunately, you guessed wrong. Galvez took a sip of the wine, savoring the soft aroma of the wine that filled his taste buds, peeling off the layers of fragrance unique to Margot estate one by one. As you said, our allies have launched a full-scale counterattack. In January, Horatio Gates lured the British to Cowpens, South Carolina, and ate his prey clean with a huge pocket. In March, it was the great Gates again who defeated the British in Guilford, North Carolina. Poor Cornwallis could only flee north to Virginia, throwing away the victory Clinton had won in the past 2 years. Our intelligence officer said that Clinton was so angry that he smashed the cup. He forced Cornwallis to attack Lafayette's Continental Army in Virginia, which was still in the process of reorganization. But Lafayette received the intelligence from us earlier than Cornwallis received the order from the messenger, and easily got rid of the British pursuit. On the other hand, Washington replaced Gates with Nathaniel Greene, who was better at attacking. The Southern Continental Army advanced triumphantly and recaptured all the southern territories except Savannah and Gilston in just over 3 months. Galvez looked at Lorraine with a smile. Kenway, although Washington's aide-de-camp has no talent for writing poetry, his words are very sincere. From July 1779 to now, in 24 months, your miraculous performance has almost armed the entire Continental Army single-handedly. Americans are no longer what they used to be, Kenway. Washington now has Greenes, Gates, Lafayette's in our own divisions, totaling more than 20 elite grenadier regiments and at least 40 line regiments. Even if they lose our support, they will no longer be completely helpless in front of the British as they were at the beginning of the war. You are a hero, an American hero. Galvez finished his speech. After listening to his long speech, Lorraine frowned and asked, Count, I don't seem to hear any praise from you. Galvez shrugged. I know that it is your miraculous performance that has made me rich. I am a top billionaire with millions of industries and millions of cash. Even though the Galvez family does not have a deep foundation like those old nobles in the country, my wealth has made me a new star of the First Council, and no one can underestimate my opinions. However, it is also because of your efficiency in making money that I hate the speed at which you make the United States strong. The war is about to end, Kenway. Where do you want me to make such a huge profit? Lorraine narrowed his eyes. But the United States is already strong. Even if I, the agent, am replaced now and those idiots are sent to die in Shack Drake's circular defense, the Americans will not hand over the guns they have obtained to France. Who knows? The Queen met me in Fontainebleau last month and told me that slow and steady wins the race. So you listened to the Queen's wise advice and planned to formally terminate our cooperation. Don't make it sound like you're burning bridges. That doesn't make me feel guilty. Galvez played with his wineglass. Like the Queen said, the basis of business should be based on the needs of both parties, not pure friendship or something else beautiful. Look, we have had a good cooperation for 24 months. During this period, your profit was no less than mine, but the Kenway Merchants Group is still the Kenway Merchants Group. There is no registration, no identity, and you haven't even added more ships. Of course, a perfect ship like the Daobao is really hard to come by. You bought a shipyard in Boston. As far as we know, the shipyard's largest business partner is the Continental Congress. It was on the verge of bankruptcy, but because of your capital injection, it added 4 new level 5 ships for the Americans in 1 year, and there are those 32-pound cannons that people can't help but pay attention to. You purchased 64 32-pound cannons through me. You said that those cannons were for self-defense, but someone told me that there were number 32-pounders on the Daobao. I can't help but wonder where they went. If they eventually show up on American ships, I wouldn't be surprised, but I would find it embarrassing. Galvez sighed. In short, Kenway, your relationship with Americans, especially the U.S. military, is really good, far beyond what France can accept. You are like a real American, a freedom fighter. This is the main reason for today's conversation. We need to reevaluate the relationship between the two sides. How to evaluate? Galvez pulled out a roll of parchment from his arms and handed it to Lorraine with great care. This is a call to arms. Due to the growth of the Continental Army, France believes the conditions for a decisive victory in the War of Independence are in place. Count Rochambeau advised Mr. Washington to launch a broad and sustained offensive in Virginia, leveraging the already stabilized south to initiate a decisive battle in the north. There will also be support from the sea. Count de Grasse has brought a powerful fleet of reinforcements from the mainland, which arrived in Martinique 10 days ago. They will soon depart from Fort-de-France, force their way into the mouth of the Chesapeake Bay, and use a decisive naval battle to completely break the long-standing British blockade of the United States. This will be the most crucial battle. If we win, the American allies will truly gain independence with the help of Great France, and the British will leave the prosperous 13 states forever, which will delight His Majesty. If we lose, Mr. Washington will likely step down, the wealth accumulated by the Americans over the past 2 years will be depleted, and smuggling will be able to continue for a long time, which will also delight our Queen. All you have to do is participate in this war, join Count de Grasse's fleet, prove your loyalty to France on the battlefield, and strive for even greater success in the future. There probably isn't a future for her, Lorraine interrupted Galvez with a smile. The marker is so special that she can't even do standard broadside fire. What can she do in such a naval battle? Use her delicate body to shield Count de Grasse from the fire. Galvez's smile froze on his face, and he subconsciously avoided looking away, thinking he was secretly avoiding looking directly at Lorraine. Kenway, Count de Grasse is an excellent naval officer. He will find a unique use for the road sign. As a French pioneer, you should not think of your motherland in such a despicable way. The motherland is not despicable. Lorraine was silent for a moment, and handed the conscription order back to Galvez with both hands. I already know your intentions. There are too many French shadows in the strength of the Continental Army, which has caused France to be passive in diplomacy. This relationship needs to be erased. This is the responsible approach for everyone. I refuse to be conscripted. Lorraine pursed his lips blatantly, but as for the motherland, as a patriotic businessman, how can I let my motherland be caught in a dilemma? Within a month, I will sell all the assets of the Kenway Merchant Group, including the road sign, the water warehouses, land warehouses, berths, and villas in New Orleans, my estates and plantations in Louisiana, and the Haight shipyard in Boston. Before the decisive battle begins, Edward Kenway will completely disappear from this world, and all the contracts between us will appear on your desk, just as if I were sunk in the upcoming naval battle. Galvez stared at Lorraine in a daze. Are you serious? We've known each other for 3 years. Have I ever lied to you? Where are you going to find a businessman with such a large sum of money to take over in just 1 month? Merchants always have friends when they travel. I will probably split the property into several parts and sell it to the British, French, Spanish, Dutch. The more diverse the sale, the harder it will be to find clues later. Then where are you going? Me. Lorraine pretended to think for a while. The East Coast is a beautiful place, not to mention the magnificent Pacific Ocean connecting to the mysterious East. I think I will go there, take my money and memories, and never come back. Won't you wish me a safe journey? Wish you a safe journey. Chapter 373, Rigid and Arrogant Idiot. The farewell with Galvez was undoubtedly a classic example of a bittersweet parting. The two sides seemed to have reached an agreement, but since Madame Deficit, whom they had never met, had already committed murder to Kenway, Galvez, deeply entangled in nepotism and unable to extricate himself, could not be trusted. Maintaining a last vestige of dignity, Lorraine immediately gathered all the sailors in New Orleans, Henna, Carmen, Catalina, Wang Yi, Belle, Leif. The familiar smuggling business no longer occupied the Lorraine team as much as it had in the past, so few remained in New Orleans. Kren was in Boston. The Valkyrie had reached a critical stage of final assembly. Aside from the 68-pound mortar on the bow, all other components were complete. Kren, the chief designer of the offensive and defensive modifications, had been in Boston for 3 months, reportedly living and eating at the shipyard, unwilling to leave his Valkyrie even for a moment. With him in command, Hayter and Humphreys would be free to work. They are designing a relatively simplified ship model based on the Valkyrie's high-speed design. While maintaining its original firepower and size, they aim to further optimize its speed and center of gravity, with a construction cost of no more than 80,000 British pounds. The draft design for this new ship, dubbed the Valkyrie-class high-speed heavy destroyer, is intended to serve as the Valkyrie's companion ship and chapter flagship, but only one is currently being built. Incidentally, the new ship is not considered a replica of the Valkyrie. The Valkyrie has its own design codename, the Valkyrie-class armored frigate. Pierce and Noah are in Kingston. The Chamber of Commerce School has introduced a new curriculum. In addition to the existing elementary, middle, and short courses, it has added advanced courses corresponding to university-level courses. These courses include marketing, ship handling, combat skills, social interaction, and other subjects not easily learned in a real university setting. Furthermore, each session will feature guest lecturers from Chamber of Commerce executives in their respective areas of expertise. This initiative, proposed by Lorraine, aims to increase the visibility of executives among the Chamber of Commerce's future elite and enhance the cohesion and loyalty of the system. Pierce and Noah are the second group, and they still have a month until they rejoin. Their predecessors were Belle and Carmen, and Lorraine plans to send Atrin and Catalina next. The 3 absences mentioned above were due to official business, while the remaining 2 are for personal reasons. After returning from San Carlos, Daniel plunged headfirst into the depths of the Fountain of Youth. He's been secluded in Crow's Nest for 8 months, his only pastime reportedly alchemical experiments. During this time, his lab has exploded 3 times, leading Lorraine to suspect that they might need nitroglycerin on their path to the Fountain of Youth. The love-struck Atrin has been captivated by the Great Cecilia. He's preparing for his wedding in Porto. Ramos will represent the Chamber of Commerce, but the members of the General Assembly will have to wait until after the honeymoon to enjoy the couple's banquet. So, here are the entire team. Lorraine looked at them and pondered for a moment. Good news and bad news. Let's talk about the simple one first. Carmen, let Leonard gather all our secret agents. All the industries of the Kenway Merchant Group must be sold within a month, and the transaction procedures should be handled at the Baton Rouge Stock Exchange as much as possible. If it is really impossible, do it in Philadelphia and New Orleans. We have discussed the process of industrial transformation many times. I only have 3 requirements. First, the Haight shipyard will be acquired by the newly established Drake Maritime Group, and Leonard will be personally responsible. No splitting, no resale, and no involvement in the management structure. Try to minimize the impact on the construction schedule of Valkyrie and new ships. Second, find a real takeover for the Louisiana estates and industries, the kind that has no special connection with the Drake Chamber of Commerce. The price can be lowered. We don't make money from those barren lands. Third, the road number. Speaking of the road number, Lorraine sighed deeply. Deobeo is a good girl. She has earned us nearly £1.7 million in the past 2 years. If we only rely on robbery and the Chamber of Commerce, we can't achieve such accumulation in 10 years. I originally planned to put her in the direct fleet. However, the French are more cautious than I thought, so she can only suffer a little. Transfer her to Northwest Europe, change hands a few more times, and hand her over to Ramos. Northwest Europe lacks transoceanic capacity, and sooner or later it will have to go through the Asian route. She will be useful there. Carmen lowered her head and wrote everything down. She looked up after she finished writing. Galvez's purpose. This is bad news. Lorraine smiled. Our supplier just unilaterally tore up the contract. There was no compensation and no apology. We are no longer friends. The wise lady of Fontainebleau wants us to die completely and fundamentally erase the fact that France is smuggling arms to the Continental Army. Hannah raised her eyebrows. I will get rid of him tonight. Why should we get rid of him? Lorraine pursed his lips. Killing him is easy, but he is the key to the smooth integration of the Kenway Merchant Group into the Drake Chamber of Commerce, so he must be alive. Only a living Galvez can bear the infamy of crossing the river and demolishing the bridge. The identity of a persecuted person will bring us benefits in the near future, so that Kenway's experience of the past 2 years will not be wasted. Lorraine stroked the handmade model of the road mark on the desk and cheered up. Just now, he and I reached a not-so-decent peace agreement in the study, but it's not reliable. From now on, until the Kenway caravan is completely dismembered, Hina will protect Carmen personally, Wang Yi will guard Katarina, and Leif will be in charge of Belle. They must stay close to each other outside the controlled area, and no independent action of any kind is allowed. During the dismemberment of the caravan, I will attend all social events to which I am invited. Perhaps I will also hold a few dances mainly for merchants at our villa to let Galvez see my sincerity in selling the property. Katrina, your task is to purchase medicinal herbs, bandages, iron wire, copper sheets and all other materials that can be considered scarce. You have to fill a whole ship with them. 5 days later, the Deobeo will make its last run on the Baltimore line. Your team will act alone and hand over this batch of goods without arms to Colonel Hamilton in person. Katarina and Wang Yi nodded solemnly. Do you want to inform him of our situation? No, just tell him that Galvez has replaced the freight forwarder. You don't have to say anything else, understood? And Belle, can you contact Emmons immediately? Contact Emmons. Belle was stunned for a moment. Are you going to ask your good brother to send someone to block Galvez in the alley and beat him up? Of course not. Lois's forehead was full of black lines. Tell me first if you can contact him. The last time we handed over was 3 days ago. At that time, he stayed in Old Barry's tavern. Judging from his worm-like schedule, he must still be there now. Lorraine breathed a sigh of relief. The French are planning a naval battle. Although the tactics are mediocre, Shaq is just a rigid and arrogant idiot. If no one reminds him, it is almost certain that he will plunge in. Belle laughed. Oh my God, you are worried about him. Is the heartwarming scene of the Drake brothers going to happen again? Unfortunately, that's not the case. Lorraine's wavering expression made it impossible to tell what he was thinking. Shaq is my prey. I would allow him to die at the hands of a truly great enemy, but a group of Bourbon nobles with ill intentions towards their allies? If he died, I would feel ashamed. Chapter 374 Unequal Concessions. The French fleet was plotting a victory, preparing to inflict a crushing defeat on the Continental Squadron in Chesapeake Bay, thereby atoning for the humiliation of Peter Parker's toy in the Windward Islands. Outsiders might never fathom the twisted and tangled emotions between the Drake brothers, just as Belle had no idea what Lorraine was thinking when she sought contact with Shaq. He had gone to look for Emmons after dark, as usual, but learned from Old Barry that Emmons had missed him and had hurriedly left New Orleans 2 hours earlier. Bad luck seemed to have taken a toll on Belle from that moment on. He tried to contact Shaq's undercover agent in New Orleans, but the contact was lost. He reported this to Lorraine that night, who immediately dispatched a Blue Dot to Charlestown, Bermuda, to search for Leonard. 2 days later, he learned that Leonard had departed for England 10 days earlier to purchase the largest private shipyard on St. George's Island. Now, Belle was truly caught in a dilemma. Leonard controlled 60% of the Chamber's covert agents and served as Lorraine's primary liaison between the Chamber's operations and the smuggling sector. Without his assistance, Carmen's work would be delayed by at least 10 days, and even the intelligence to Shaq would be delivered without a suitable messenger. This was a sensitive period, and the sailors remaining in New Orleans, including Lorraine, were likely under Galvez's surveillance. Any overly sensitive action could potentially lead to adverse reactions. As for the sailors outside New Orleans, Pierce, Noah, and Daniel were unsuitable to deliver this information, and the distance between Cren and Atrin was too great to resolve the urgent situation. After careful consideration, Lorraine ultimately decided to take the risk and have the Belle team board the Daobao, disembark in the vast ocean, and head directly for the Royal Naval Dockyard in Bermuda. The Daobao set sail 5 days after the meeting, and Belle arrived in Bermuda 7 days later. However, this tight schedule ultimately came to nothing. Belle was unable to meet Shaq and ultimately failed to deliver the crucial intelligence. Where had Shaq gone? Time flashed back a few days ago, to noon the day after Lorraine's meeting with Galvez, in Bermuda, at the Royal Naval Dockyard. In Shaq's office, the simple-minded Captain Imani was scowling. Sir, this is a conspiracy. Are the bureaucrats in the Navy Department composed of blind people and idiots? Have they forgotten the ethics and honor of aristocrats and gentlemen? During your tenure, the Continental Fleet's blockade rate of the Chesapeake Bay was as high as 68%. The rate even climbed to 79% during the rounds commanded by you personally. This rate is unprecedented, the peak of the Continental Fleet since the North American unrest. The data is almost twice the average of your two predecessors, and the actual number of ships sunk and captured is 1.5 times. Can't they see it? How can they turn a blind eye to such a brilliant record? How can they shamelessly blame you for the Continental Army's armed assistance? God will be ashamed of them, sir. You should appeal, especially now that the situation in North America is becoming more and more tense. You should stand up and defend such an order, such as going directly to Buckingham. You're too noisy, Captain. Before he could finish his words, Armani's excitement was interrupted by the laziness outside the door. Emmons, sleepy-eyed, scratched his head and pushed open the door. He had an unshaven beard and looked dusty, but the moment he looked into Shaq's eyes, he became serious. Admiral, I'm back, night sailing. I bought a fishing boat that set sail at 6 in the evening and landed 20 minutes ago. Shaq nodded silently. Have you read the letter I brought to you? I read it at least 20 times on the boat. Emmons snorted softly and asked without any context, do you think this is suppression or protection? I don't know. A trace of confusion flashed across Shaq's eyes. Someone has noticed the merits hidden in the war and is eager to squeeze me out of my current position. This is not the first time, and I am not surprised at all, but this time, the messenger brought messages from Deputy Minister Lindham and Lord Hood while delivering the official letter. The Deputy Minister reminded me to pay attention to the movements of French warships and to be wary of gun ports beyond the intelligence. The Lord's words were a bit vague. He only said that Tavistock had not held a ball for too long, and it was Drake's dereliction of duty as a nobleman to let the family emblem be covered in dust. Emmons frowned and covered his chin. As Shack's advisor, he had long understood that Shack's political rise was fueled by the favor of King George III and the favor of Undersecretary of the Admiralty, Greenwood Drake. Furthermore, there were two prominent naval veterans, Lord Hood and Sir Parker. Both were comrades and close friends of Lorraine and Shack's father, Elia Drake. Whenever they addressed Shack, they treated him as a junior, not a military prodigy. Shack's connections were extremely limited for a family of his stature. His circle consisted of only these four factions, his greatest and only source of support in surviving the political intrigues and deceptions. Now, two of these four factions were suggesting that Shack accept this patently unjust transfer order and withdraw at the last moment. Emmons frantically recalled the military intelligence of the past few days, feeling that some crucial intelligence had been overlooked or omitted. However, he could not come up with any. The Continental Congress's navy hadn't expanded significantly. Thanks to the thriving Hayes shipyards, nearly all of the U.S. Navy's newly launched warships in recent years had been anchored at the mouth of the Charles River in Boston. The French Navy, assisting in the defense of the North American coastline, had also made no significant moves. After the Battle of the Windward Islands, they had been heavily drawn down to maintain the balance of power in the Caribbean, essentially confined to a few strategically advantageous bays, leaving the vast coastline entirely to the Royal Navy, under the control of Shack. Besides that, and Peter, Shack's sudden voice startled Emmons from his reverie. He couldn't help but ask, even Sir Parker, Peter is very different. Shack shook his head. He asked his good nephew to bring me a handwritten letter, telling me that if I intend to continue to lead the defense of North America, he will launch a second round of military strikes on Martinique in mid-August, not strive to be in mid-August, but in mid-August. He made it very clear that in order to deal with emergencies, the Duke of Wales, the Endeavour and the Son of Poseidon are on standby at Kingston Royal Port. He can organize a large-scale fleet within 7 days and blockade the waters off Fort-de-France in at most 20 days. Is the Sir out of his mind? Emmons widened his eyes in horror, wanting to create a decisive battle situation when it is not necessary. This kind of recklessness will leave an indelible stain on his military career. He actually went to this extent to help you. Is the situation really that bad now? That's the problem. Shack's voice sounded exhausted. We have no intelligence, neither the Admiralty, the Secret Service, nor Peter. We all smell the scent of a coming storm, but what will this rainstorm wash out? Everything is just groundless guesses based on experience. Do you have any good plans? No. The current situation is too chaotic. There are Americans who are sitting on the sidelines, the extremely active French, the wavering Spanish, the sneaky Dutch, and enemies and friends within the Navy, and those idle people who are sitting in the neutral, waiting for the show to begin. The Drake family name should be the best at seizing benefits in such chaos. My ancestors have shown their talent for navigating muddy waters more than once, but my father always favored Lorraine. He passed this talent to my stupid brother without reservation. This is his specialty. I sometimes think, if Lorraine was by my side. At this point, his words were interrupted by his own laughter and stopped abruptly. How stupid, he said self-deprecatingly. If Lorraine were here, he would certainly wish that I died in the fight with the French. Keeping silent is already his greatest rationality and restraint. How could he provide any useful advice? Captain Armani swallowed his saliva and cautiously intervened in this dangerous topic. Sir, I think you can really try to ask President Drake for advice. I have had several contacts with him. He is a helpful gentleman with good. You are too noisy, Captain. The same interruption, but last time it was said by Emmons alone. This time, it was said by Shack and Emmons in unison. Armani blushed as he retreated. Shack stopped talking about sex and calmed down, looking at Emmons quietly. I'm waiting for your advice, Emmons. 3 votes in favor, 1 abstention, Admiral, Emmons said with a bitter expression. I always hate unequal concessions, but common sense tells me you'd better listen to the advice of the wise. Unequal concessions. Shack was silent for a moment, a mixture of regret and relief. He leaned over and pulled out another official letter from the built-in safe in his desk, handing it to his two trusted officers. In short, this transfer is very urgent. The new admiral will take up the post in 3 days. After the handover, the line will be decommissioned and transferred to the Plymouth Naval Dockyard for a year of care and maintenance. My new position has been decided. I will be a civilian in the Admiralty, serving as the Lieutenant General Director of the External Relations Department and Deputy Director of the General Staff. The two positions allow me to bring a total of 5 attachés. You are all on the attaché list. Armani will be promoted to Major this winter. The scene changed so quickly that Armani and Emmons opened their mouths in shock. Admiral. Admiral, even the transfer order has come down. Has this matter been decided in advance? The transfer order came with an official letter. But it only states the proposed position and the handover date. I have the right to choose whether to accept it, and the actual entry procedures will not be processed until I return to Plymouth. It was very rare that the usually rigorous Shaq stretched in front of his subordinates. The destination has been decided, gentlemen. We should clean up some loose ends in the last 3 days. Armani? Yes, sir. There are big loopholes in the procedures for Judea's departure and retention. I have sought the advice of Lady Judea. We have gone back to 1779 to handle his retirement procedures and forge 5 retirement applications, each one more strongly worded than the last, to show people my desire to retain him and my determination to break up with him. What about the salary he paid out? Don't worry, he only retained his title, and his salary has never been paid. Captain Armani immediately broke out in sweat on his forehead. Sir, you are wise, Emmons. Emmons raised his eyebrows. Your servant who is always at your beck and call is here, my master. I heard that Lorraine is tinkering with a new type of ship in Boston, an invincible and terrifying marine behemoth. These are the words of the former Major Judea after he was drunk. The ship is designed with the caliber of a battleship's gun barrel, 32 pounds and 68 pounds, with the physique of a first-class ship, nearly 70 meters long, and the speed of the latest 5th-class high-speed ship, which is more than 10 knots. I admit that if these design indicators can be achieved one by one, she will indeed become a great ship. But invincible. I heard that she only has 1 gun compartment, with 48 or 52 guns. Maybe Judea wants to say that she will be invincible in the world of privateering and piracy. Otherwise, facing a real first-class ship, she is still just a small bug that can be easily crushed to death. Shaq listened with interest, and suddenly asked, 32 pounds and 68 pounds. Can these contraband be bought on the black market? As far as I know, he has obtained 32 pounds from the French, and the quantity is sufficient, but there is no way he can have 68 pounds. The 68-pound shipborne mortar can only be produced by the Royal Navy's gun foundry, and each gun has an independent file and destination. Emmons, who was talking eloquently, spoke more and more softly, and became more and more afraid. Admiral, you are not planning to. From the moment I accepted the transfer order, which was yesterday afternoon at 2:17, I am no longer the master of the Royal Naval Dockyard. In view of my upright conduct over the past 2 years, my departure inventory was carried out overnight and took only 6 hours. The list and confirmation were sent to Kingston this morning. This means that anything missing from the warehouse is no longer my responsibility, but the fault of my successor. Of course, I cannot provide 68-pound mortars, and the entire Continental Squadron has no demand for 68-pounders. But the warehouse does have 6 brand new 48-pounders. Emmons, didn't you just say that our concession this time was unfair? Perhaps your personal relationship with Chief Purser Raymond can make this handover fairer. I've heard about some of your dealings, and I have to say, it's quite ingenious. Interlude 1781, and P.S. 2-part chapter. Wishing everyone a Merry Christmas and a happy family reunion. Chapter 375 Drake Chamber of Commerce welcomes you. September 1784, West Africa. The Vikings lost at drifts through the taverns of Dakar. A chasm arose from the darkness. The chasm is Jinganan, born at the beginning of time, flowing to the universe's end. Ice and fire raged on both sides of Jinganan. To the south lay Muspelheim, ablaze day and night. Fire giants ruled that land. The great king, the lord of violence, Surtur, the tyrant, is eternally dissatisfied, ever angry. His power reaches heaven and earth. With a wave of his hand, he summons celestial fire. Wherever he looks, even the grasslands turn to desert. He guards his realm with a sharp sword, a blade condensed from the twilight, brighter than the sun, more dazzling than the aurora. He slew victory. At dusk, He crushed Victory's head and tossed the twilight high into the sky. A chasm symmetrical to Zheng Anyue opened in the sky, and endless lava engulfed Asgard. Great Surtur, ever powerful, ever strong. He finally destroyed the world, leaving behind scars and praising the legend that belongs only to fire. After a ballad ended, Pierce cleared his throat and raised his glass to the dark-skinned young man across from him. Hashem, relax. Deep hatred may be the hallmark of this town, but it's certainly not the hallmark of a drunkard. Are you saying my appearance is too conspicuous? The black youth named Hashem asked calmly, speaking fluent French. Mr. Versatile Admiral, is it my expression or my skin color that's conspicuous? Skin color has never been a problem, Pierce said, waving his hands casually. It might be a problem elsewhere, but this is Gorée Island, a West Africa flowing with golden fire. Open your eyes, and the sandy beaches are filled with a warm and enthusiastic indigenous people, a constant reminder that black is the original color of this continent. You're quite good at talking, the original color. Pierce realized he had gotten out of hand. Hashem fell silent again, and the two of them stared at each other at the table in silence. He could only awkwardly sip his wine, letting the bitterness of the liquid slide down his throat. I'm sorry, Hashem. You know, that wasn't my intention. It's not your fault, sir. My people's suffering has made me less peaceful. I find it difficult to return kindness properly until I've slain my enemies. That's why I'm here, Pierce said loudly. I'm the invisible spirit that resides in the magic lamp. I will grant your wish. Inspiring words. Pierce had always been adept at expressing his emotions, and now, as an adult, his words possessed an even more inspiring charm. He knew how to move others. Even those who, like Hashem, erected a wall within themselves couldn't withstand the confidence that came from their souls, and the unparalleled sincerity that accompanied that confidence. For a moment, Hashem imagined he had met another passionate fighter, a relative who meant everything to him. Hashem's full name was Hashem in Rio Despera. He was born in the Cape Verde Islands, the son of the chief of the indigenous Praia tribe. His tribe had thrived on the archipelago for generations, subsisting on a daily basis through fishing and hunting, with a few stints as pirates and plunderers in their spare time. 21 years ago, before Hashem was even born, his father wasn't even a chief. Before becoming chief, his father was a prominent figure among the tribe's younger generation, wise and strong, admired by both men and women. He had a hunting party of loyal followers who often plundered white merchant ships in canoes along the remote coast of Cape Verde. They would torture them for anything valuable, then, after emptying the ships, kill them and sink the bodies. That day had begun much the same way. In the waters north of the archipelago, he had seized a stray merchant ship as usual. This time, before he could interrogate them, the ship's owner stepped forward. He was a gentle young white man from the distant Swiss Confederation, claiming to be Count Lovedens of the canton of Bern. Furthermore, he was no merchant, he had sailed simply to visit a cherished friend with his wife, who was about to give birth. The story seemed to end here. For a white nobleman without money or power, confronted by the murderous natives, the worst fate was to sink with his ship. However, Count Lovedens, a brilliant orator as skilled as Pierce, managed to negotiate a deal with Hashem's father through empty words in this critical situation. The agreement consisted of 3 parts. 1,000 kilograms of flour in exchange for his and his crew's safety. 1,000 liters of wine for essentials during their captivity, and 3,000 kilograms of bacon in exchange for everyone's freedom. For the first time, the captives were brought back to the tribe and placed under the personal supervision of Hashem's father as friends. This act marked a turning point in the fates of both parties. Perhaps due to the shock of the kidnapping, on the 3rd day of their captivity, the pregnant Countess Lovedens went into premature labor. Even more ridiculous, due to her influence, Hashem's mother also went into labor the same day, and it was a difficult labor. 2 men who had previously met completely unknown met for the first time in their lives, as fathers. On that stormy night, each displayed a breathtaking display of humanity. Hashem and his mother were first sentenced to death by the tribe's witch doctor. Tribal medical methods, such as Hashem's, proved impossible to save, not even the mother or the child. Upon learning of the situation, his father made an inexplicable decision, suppressing his grief and handing over the lavish delivery team he had prepared for his child to his white friend under his control. The Earl, however, did not stay by his wife's side. Upon hearing of Hashem's father's plight, he engaged in a fierce argument with the witch doctor, determined to die. In the end, He took on the responsibility of delivering Hashim, miraculously correcting the baby's position and ensuring his birth. The identical cries of babies echoed throughout the small tribe, and the chaotic night ultimately ended in a perfect, auspicious end. Both children were born safely, both mothers suffered no birth complications, and, more importantly, the two fathers forged a lifelong friendship. Count Lovedens was released, leaving the tribe intact, with neither its ships nor its treasures. 6 months later, he returned to the area and returned with triple the promised gifts to Hashim's father, earning the tribe's goodwill. From then on, the Count became a regular visitor to the tribe, seemingly viewing it as a place of divine redemption. Over the years, he returned repeatedly, establishing schools, hospitals, churches, and farms, bringing the Praya people the rarest form of true civilization and equality of our time. The younger generation, led by Hashim's father, embracing his legacy with the most responsive individuals. They abandoned primitive and barbaric tribal traditions, considered speaking and writing French a source of honor, and even abandoned totemic beliefs, actively embracing God. 15 years ago, 6 years after Hashim's father met Count Lovedens, Hashim's father launched a coup. With a slogan for the sake of the children, he expelled the tribe's conservative and rigid leaders, banishing the chiefs, elders, witch doctors, and shamans, young and old, to a deserted island. He was elected the new chief by popular vote. He invited Count Lovedens to his coronation ceremony, and on his first day in office, he begged the Count to baptize Hashim and become his godfather. He also requested that the Count take Hashim to Europe so that his children could experience true civilization firsthand, just as all Europeans did. Count Lovedens gladly accepted the responsibility. He carried Hashim to the holy water font, wet the child's hair with a wooden ladle, and for the first time, he whispered his Christian name, in Leo d'Espera, Unler d'Espoir, a beam of hope. The two men placed their purest hopes in this Christian name, hoping that Hashim, upon reaching adulthood, would become a shining light of enlightenment for the entire Praya tribe. Thus began Hashim's arduous journey of study. His natural black skin led to discrimination everywhere, a situation even the Count could do nothing to alleviate. In the dead of night, he could only face Africa and confide his grievances to the two tribesmen who accompanied him in his studies. But his sense of mission sustained him. With the Count's influence and his ingenuity, he successfully completed his studies and, at the age of 20, earned a master's degree in astronomy from the University of Bern. His hard work, coupled with his enviable cultural heritage, earned him recognition in European high society. He finally gained the confidence to lead his tribe. However, God showed no favoritism for his faith. When he returned home, armed with his knowledge, he found only abandoned villages and overgrown farmland. The tribe had vanished. Hashim rushed back to Switzerland like a madman. After repeated inquiries, he finally learned the full details from the Count. 7 years earlier, a storm had driven a Portuguese slave ship ashore on the islands of the Praya people. Their leader was a thug named Ontalagan. Hashim's father had offered them assistance, but they exploited the Praya people's affinity for whites, contaminated the water source, and then wiped out the entire tribe with a few bottles of cheap drugs. The Count learned of the incident 6 months later. He had diligently investigated, expending countless hours and energy in exchange for few results. He had found neither Ontalagan nor the whereabouts of the missing tribesmen. Overnight, Hashim's faith collapsed. The dark astronomer, acclaimed in European academia, was gone, replaced by a ruthless pirate with a deep hatred for the Portuguese. With 1,000 louis of gold donated by the Count, Hashim established a pirate group called the Revenge of Lapua. Using his own knowledge as a sword, he guided the pirates into the labyrinthine, bustling waterways of Cape Verde. For 4 months, he transformed himself into a ghost, attacking every ship flying the Portuguese flag, slaughtering every crew member serving the Portuguese. He also drew nourishment from numerous slave ships, constantly expanding his fleet and recruiting crews. The Revenge of Lapua grew rapidly, soon becoming a monstrous force of over 2,000 men, 16 ships, and not a single person who knew how to fire a cannon. Hashim led them to defeat the French Navy's encirclement twice in a row, and then they met Pierce and the General Assembly's Special Service Fleet that Lorraine spent 3 years tailoring for Pierce. It was a devastating defeat without any suspense. Hashim looked Pierce in the eyes. "Mr. Admiral, I don't understand." "Don't understand? What don't you understand?" "I don't understand your attitude," Hashim answered directly. I admit that the Drake Chamber of Commerce is the most powerful fleet I have ever encountered, even more powerful than the French Navy in Dakar. My men and I hardly caused any damage to you. But that was an undisputed hostile act after all. You sympathize with me and don't blame me. It is already incomprehensible tolerance and magnanimity. Why did you take the initiative to help me with revenge? So that's the reason to help you. Pierce touched his chin and thought for a long time. I got the independent command of the fleet at the age of 15. I am 16 years old this year. Africa was the first pioneering journey of my team and I to sail independently, and you and the Lapu Revenge Army were the first maritime force that dared to attack my fleet after leaving the protection of your brothers. You know what? At the moment of the attack, those same inexperienced guys and I didn't exclaim, but cheered. It was also at that moment that I decided to give you a chance to fully introduce yourself no matter what. Completely ignoring Hashim's embarrassed and stunned expression, Pierce laughed triumphantly 3 times. There's nothing more to say then. Publicly, my brother told me that the slave trade is a cancer on the back of the god of commerce. I won't deliberately target them, but I won't advocate for any damn justice for them. Personally, I like your character. You distinguish between gratitude and resentment, and you will avenge your enemies. And there's a third point, which is your reputation. I've heard of you. When you were resting in the Azores, the Portuguese called you the ghostly Lapua. The French fleet in Dakar organized 2 encirclement and suppression operations for you. They knew you were in the Cape Verde Islands, but they couldn't find any trace of you. Those special marks on your nautical chart are astrology, right? Star chart positioning is a very advanced positioning technique. It is delicate and precise. It can help sailors appear and disappear freely in complex hydrological environments. My brother taught me the tricks, but everyone has their own strengths. I probably lack the talent in this area. No matter what, I can't remember those complex and changing star tracks. At this point, Pierce pressed down the table with a bang, and his whole body suddenly leaned forward, his face almost rushing to the other side of the table. Join my ship. Your skills will be very useful, and you have never shown your face in public. There is no wanted information about you even in the Portuguese colonies. Hashim avoided his eyes guiltily. Mr. Admiral, I only have revenge in my heart. Then, where is your enemy? Pierce followed Hashim's gaze, and spoke word by word, every word piercing the heart. You could be bounded in a nutshell and count yourself a king of infinite space. French turned into English. And after a short sentence it switched back to French. You can continue to deceive yourself here, continue to search for your mortal enemy of Portugal in the French colonies. But if you do so, will your vanished tribe truly find comfort from its blind violence? It's time to step out of the nutshell. Hashim, give up those pirate jobs you're not good at, come to my ship, and be the navigator and astronomer you are best at. Join my team, and your hatred will become my hatred, the hatred of Drake, and the hatred of my brother. My brother Lorraine is a true king without boundaries. No one can escape his justice. Even if we have to go to heaven or hell, we will find that on to Lagwain and use the most cruel means to make him see the side of hell while he is still alive. Want to realize your dream? Navigator Hashim in Rio d'Espera, the Drake Chamber of Commerce welcomes you. PS1, Unler d'Espoir, French, Light of Hope. PS2, you could be bounded in a nutshell and count yourself a king of infinite space. The main text is from Shakespeare's The Revenge of the Prince. The original text doesn't use you and yourself, but I and myself. The official translation in simplified Chinese is quite poetic, roughly saying, I could shut myself up in a peach pit and still believe myself to be a monarch without boundaries. PS3. Regarding Switzerland's official languages. Before the founding of the Swiss Confederation, Switzerland was largely part of the German region. Its last overlord was the Holy Roman Empire, the Austrian Habsburgs. Therefore, the official languages of modern Switzerland include French, German, and, although only in a limited area, Romansh. However, as mentioned earlier in the introduction to Atoms, German is a relatively late maturing language, not developing its own system until the 19th century. Therefore, it's safe to say that by the 18th century, French was the official language of most of the Swiss Confederation, including the canton of Bern. PS4. The Edda, a Viking poetic medium, often features hymns to the gods, with the occasional heroic epic. PS5. Continuing with the 2-in-1, the Christmas chapter. After all, this is a Western history book. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, Every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.